Sejun stood there holding the glowing blue crystal, looking pleasantly surprised as he asked if this really was the holy stone known as Ice Cube. Sitting on his shoulder, the little monkey stared at it with equally wide eyes, clearly impressed by the mysterious treasure. A system window immediately appeared and revealed exactly what Sejun had just received. The crystal was a fragment of a star that had fallen from the sky long ago. It carried an S+ rank, belonged to Tower Farmer Park Sejun, and required at least 100 mana to use. More importantly, it granted its owner the power to control ice through mana. As an added safety feature, if the owner was ever in danger, the artifact would automatically encase them in protective ice. Looking down at the perfectly shaped blue crystal resting in his palm, Sejun quickly understood the important part. As long as he supplied mana, he could manipulate ice however he wanted. Naturally, there was only one thing to do. Test it immediately. With a curious smile, Sejun casually muttered that he should see what it could do. The crystal began glowing brighter and brighter as mana swirled around it in a circular ring. Then, with an energetic shout, Sejun thrust his hand forward. A massive block of solid ice suddenly materialized out of thin air. Boom! The giant chunk crashed onto the ground, sending dust scattering across the cracked earth. For a moment, everyone just stared. Kwon, Theo, Bat, Iona, even the nearby monkey all froze in amazement. Sejun blinked before excitedly announcing that it actually worked. But now that he knew it worked, another idea immediately popped into his head. Pulling out a jar filled with golden honey, Sejun wondered if he could combine the crystal's power with something else. This time he focused much more carefully. Rather than creating another giant block, he wanted precision. A thin stream of honey dripped onto the glowing crystal. Sejun carefully controlled the mana. A small flash of light appeared. Then a perfectly formed ice cube shot outward, trapping the golden honey neatly inside. Sejun's face lit up. Success. Meanwhile, Kwon had already climbed on top of the giant ice block like it was a playground attraction. Seeing that, Sejun held up the newly created honey-filled ice cube and offered it to the little bear. Kwon accepted it immediately. Taking a cautious nibble, he blinked and noted that it was cold. Then he completely abandoned caution. Crunch! He bit directly into the frozen treat. After chewing for a moment, his eyes widened and he happily announced that it was sweet, refreshing, and absolutely delicious. Sejun laughed. Honestly, he had expected exactly that reaction. Then he noticed something else. The monkey sitting on his shoulder was practically drooling. Looking at the eager little guy, Sejun asked if he wanted some too. The answer was written all over the monkey's face. Smiling, Sejun told everyone to wait for a minute before turning around and heading inside. As Sejun disappeared through the doorway, Theo's attention shifted toward Iona. Curious, he asked where she had managed to find such an incredible item. Iona casually explained that she had stumbled across it at the bottom of the abandoned mine. Then her expression darkened. A heavy shadow crossed her face as she quietly added that she had her subordinate to thank for helping her find it. The sudden change in atmosphere immediately alarmed Theo. Sweat appeared on his forehead as he cautiously asked if something had happened. Instantly, Iona's cheerful smile returned. She casually brushed it off and said she simply planned to have a nice little conversation with that subordinate later. For some reason, that answer felt far more terrifying. Watching her walk away, Theo nervously asked if she was already leaving. Iona gave him a friendly farewell and suggested they meet again back on the 99th floor. As she left, Theo couldn't help shivering. The look in her eyes a moment ago had been genuinely frightening. Right then, Sejun returned carrying a basket. Calling everyone over, he revealed what he had been working on. Floating in front of him were several beautiful frozen treats. Each crystal-clear ice cube contained colorful slices of fruit suspended inside like tiny works of art. The reaction was immediate. Kwon, Bat, the little monkey, and even the female minotaur all stared with sparkling eyes. Someone let out an excited cheer. The monkey proudly raised a fruit-filled ice cube above its head in celebration. Bat happily licked another one. Kwon, however, immediately suffered the consequences of eating frozen food too fast. His eyes squeezed shut as a brutal brain freeze struck him. The sight was both tragic and hilarious. Not wanting to be left out, Theo bounded forward with a huge grin and begged Chairman Park to make frozen chewer treats next. Far away from the cheerful gathering, the story shifted to a far darker location. Under a gloomy sky stood the gravity magic tower on the 90th floor of the Black Tower. Its ominous structure floated among the clouds, casting a shadow over the barren landscape below. Inside a dim council chamber, several animal mages sat around a large circular table. The atmosphere was tense. Shocked murmurs spread throughout the room as news circulated that Lady Iona might be dead. Standing before them, Ganoba looked devastated. Sweat covered his face as he explained what had supposedly happened. According to him, unstable magic stones inside the abandoned mine had triggered a catastrophic chain reaction. The resulting explosion collapsed the entire mountain. And in the process, Lady Iona had sacrificed herself to save his life. The room fell into stunned silence. One lizard mage immediately panicked, unable to believe that the strongest mage in the Black Tower could really be gone. Genoba sadly insisted that it was true. A goat mage remained calm and asked an important question. Was there any undeniable proof that Lady Iona had actually died? The question hit Genoba like a slap. His expression twisted instantly. With obvious irritation, he snapped back that an entire mountain had collapsed on top of her. Of course she was dead. Did they seriously think he would lie about something this important? The sudden outburst surprised everyone. The goat mage quickly tried to calm the situation, explaining that nobody was accusing him of lying. After a long sigh, Genoba stood from his seat. He claimed he needed to report the tragedy to the Mage Association as quickly as possible. As he walked away from the table and headed toward the dark corridor beyond, he glanced back over his shoulder. For just a moment, a sly look appeared on his face. Internally, he reflected that while the situation was tragic, someone still needed to take responsibility. Someone needed to become the new Tower Master of Gravity. And that someone would be him. After bidding the others farewell, Genoba disappeared down the corridor. The remaining mages watched him leave in silence. The moment he was gone, the lizard mage turned eagerly toward the goat mage and suggested they should begin preparing a coronation immediately. If Genoba was going to become the new Tower Master, perhaps they should start making arrangements now. The goat mage didn't react. His face remained completely unreadable. Calmly, he advised that there was no need to rush. They should take their time. Sitting quietly beside the large black crystal ball at the center of the chamber, the goat mage stared into the distance. Then he repeated those same words to himself. They should take their time. And judging by the suspicious look in his eyes, he clearly wasn't convinced that the story Genoba told was the whole truth. The Minotaurs are enjoying themselves in the restored banana grove, happily munching on fresh leaves and practically praising how good they taste. Nearby, Sejun looks energized and ready to work. With an encouraging grin, he announces that snack time is over and it's time to get back to reviving the farm. Behind him, Bat-Bat and a little monkey are still busy finishing their own treats. Without wasting time, Sejun gets to work. He raises his hands and channels his magic into the grove. Bright energy flows from him as more banana trees begin recovering under his care. While Sejun focuses on healing the farm, Theo quietly glances around and then slips away without drawing attention. As Theo scurries down a forest path, he mutters to himself that he knew something was strange. Eventually he stops and looks toward the enormous rocky mountain visible in the distance. He lifts his front paw, and sure enough, it starts glowing. Theo's eyes immediately light up. His treasure-sensing ability is still reacting to that mountain. The cat merchant quickly becomes convinced there's valuable treasure hidden somewhere nearby. A huge grin spreads across his face as he starts imagining the possibilities. In his mind, if he finds the treasure first, Chairman Park will surely praise him. Maybe he'll even get all of Chairman Park's affection for himself. Naturally, Theo begins laughing like a tiny villain plotting world domination. Unfortunately for him, his sneaky solo mission lasts about 5 seconds. A voice suddenly appears behind him. Kwon is standing there. Theo nearly jumps out of his fur. The little bear innocently asks if Theo is looking for treasure. Now sweating nervously, Theo immediately wants to know when Kwon started following him. Meanwhile, Kwon is already excited. Treasure hunting sounds fun. After a brief moment, Theo realizes having company isn't actually a bad thing. The forest is pretty creepy, and he was honestly a little nervous about exploring it alone anyway. So he quickly changes his attitude. With a bright smile, he suggests they work together and find the treasure as a team. Kwon loves the idea. The little bear cheers enthusiastically and the two set off toward the mountain together. Back at the grove, Sejun suddenly remembers something important. The monkeys had mango and watermelon seeds, and he wanted to ask Theo about them. He looks around. No Theo. Bat-Bat notices something else. Not only is Theo gone, but Iona and Kwon have also disappeared. The little monkey doesn't know where any of them went. Sejun tilts his head and wonders if they're all just sleeping somewhere, maybe inside the storage room or another building nearby. Meanwhile, far from the grove, Theo and Kwon continue their adventure. Theo stops again and extends his glowing paws. The golden light reacts strongly. He's completely certain now that a real treasure is somewhere ahead. Then Kwon suddenly holds something up. With an excited expression, he asks if he found it. Theo turns around. Nope. It's just an ordinary magic stone. Theo explains that stones like that can be found almost anywhere and contain only a tiny amount of mana. Kwon immediately looks disappointed. Trying to keep the treasure hunter's spirit alive, Theo reassures him that the real treasure must still be somewhere ahead. That works instantly. Kwon throws the stone away and charges off again. Not long later, he comes running back proudly carrying a giant bone. He asks if this one is treasure. Theo stares, then sighs. No, that's just a monster bone. Kwon happily throws it away and rushes off again. A little later, he returns carrying a strangely shaped rock. Theo barely even looks at it before informing him it's just a rock. Away it goes. Then Kwon disappears again. And somehow his next discovery is even worse. This time he comes back proudly holding an enormous cobra. Theo completely loses it. His eyes nearly pop out of his head as he screams for Kwon to throw the thing away immediately. Kwon immediately launches the snake into the sky. The poor snake probably has no idea what just happened. Afterward, Kwon admits that treasure hunting is actually pretty difficult. Meanwhile, Theo looks exhausted. He explains that if treasure were easy to find, everyone would already have it. But Kwon isn't discouraged at all. Instead, he smiles brightly and says he's having fun because he gets to search together with his big brother. The words hit Theo completely out of nowhere. For a moment, the usually dramatic merchant cat just freezes. His expression softens. You can practically see his heart melting. Then suddenly, his paws start glowing intensely. Theo gasps. This time the reaction is different, much stronger, much closer. He immediately realizes they've finally found something real. Following the signal, Theo approaches a massive stone boulder and places his glowing paw against it. The reaction becomes even stronger. Now he's completely certain. This is the spot. Turning toward Kwon, Theo confidently declares that the treasure is hidden inside the rock. Then he asks the most obvious person possible to solve the problem. Can Kwon break it? The little bear doesn't need to be asked twice. He plants his feet firmly, tightens his muscles, and prepares to strike. Then, boom! Kwon slams down with overwhelming force. The impact is so powerful that the enormous boulder splits cleanly in half. Even Theo looks shocked by how effortlessly he did it. As the stone separates, something hidden inside becomes visible. Theo's eyes widen, then his entire face lights up. Inside the boulder is a beautiful treasure deposit filled with glittering purple crystals and glowing gem-like spheres. The entire interior sparkles brilliantly. They actually found it. Theo excitedly announces that this is the real treasure. Kwon immediately starts jumping around in celebration. Theo joins him, proudly declaring that their treasure hunt was a complete success because they found it together. Holding one of the glowing purple gems carefully in his paws, Theo beams with satisfaction. More than anything, he's excited because he's certain Chairman Park is going to love this treasure.
Like, share.
The scene shifts all the way to Kenya, where a blue helicopter flies low across the open grasslands before touching down smoothly. As the rotors whip up dust everywhere, a man in a suit steps out. It's none other than Sejun, a representative of the Korean Awakened Association. He straightens his suit with his usual composed confidence before being welcomed by Eun-jin, the president of the Kenya Hunter Association branch, who thanks him for making the long trip. Sejun doesn't waste any time with small talk. He immediately asks to inspect the site, and Eun-jin gladly leads him there by car. As they drive across the vast plains, Sejun asks if the destination is still far away. Eun-jin explains that the area is under strict security, so access is heavily restricted. He also takes the opportunity to sincerely thank South Korea, saying their support prevented the crisis from spiraling completely out of control. Hearing that, Sejun quietly lets out a relieved sigh. Just then, Eun-jin announces they've arrived. The two step out of the car, and Eun-jin gestures toward the enormous field ahead. Looking at the unbelievable sight, he can't help but ask where they even managed to get something like this. Stretching as far as the eye can see is a massive field of towering green onions, while countless dead locusts lie piled up all around them. Eun-jin explains that the swarm attacked the crops, but instead of destroying them, the insects simply dropped dead on the spot. Sejun freezes for a moment. His thoughts immediately drift back to the mysterious Park Sejun. A bead of sweat rolls down his face as one question refuses to leave his mind. How did Sejun know an omen of destruction would appear on the other side of the world? That information was classified at the highest level, known only to a handful of the world's most powerful people. Then the scene shifts back to the 77th floor, where Sejun looks up at the now lush banana grove with a huge smile on his face. Perched proudly on top of his straw hat, the little monkey celebrates right along with him as the two excitedly cheer that they finally did it. A flood of system notifications immediately appears, confirming that every sick banana tree on the 77th floor has been fully restored. The farm is officially back in operation, fresh bananas have started growing once again, and even the ownership deed has been updated, officially recognizing it as the 77th floor banana farm. Sejun wipes the sweat from his forehead and lets out a long, exhausted breath, admitting that restoring the entire farm was no joke. An elderly monkey steps forward with a warm smile and sincerely thanks him for everything he's done. Nearby, several little monkeys proudly show off their own work. They explain that they dug irrigation channels exactly the way Sejun taught them and promise they'll keep taking care of the farm so the trees won't dry out even if it doesn't rain. Hearing that, Sejun smiles with satisfaction. That means they'll finally be able to grow mangoes and watermelons here again. Just then, Theo's familiar voice calls out from behind. Sejun turns around in surprise, while the tiny monkey on his hat sticks out its tongue after spotting Theo and Kwon walking toward them. But something immediately catches Sejun's attention. Both Theo and Kwon are wearing suspiciously smug smiles. Curious, Sejun asks what those expressions are all about. Without saying another word, Kwon happily dumps a huge pile of glowing violet spheres onto the ground. Theo proudly announces that they brought back treasure. Sejun kneels down to take a closer look, amazed by how beautiful the glowing orbs are. Even the elderly monkey stares in disbelief, wondering how they managed to find something that precious. As soon as Sejun picks one up, a system window pops into view. It's a Grade C Lesser Stone of Mastery, an item that permanently increases the proficiency of a chosen skill by 10 points. For a second, Sejun can only stare at it in complete disbelief. An item that boosts skill proficiency? That's ridiculously valuable. The elderly monkey is just as stunned, explaining that even 100 experienced miners working full-time would be lucky to discover that many in an entire week. Realizing just how incredible this treasure is, Sejun crouches down and warmly pats both Theo and Kwon on the head, sincerely thanking them for finding it. Of course, Theo wastes absolutely no time cashing in his reward. With sparkling eyes, he immediately demands churro. Kwon quickly joins in, happily asking for frozen honey instead. Looking at the two adorable faces staring back at him, Sejun can't help but laugh. He happily agrees, promising they'll both get as much as they want. But before handing out snacks, Sejun raises one of the purple stones with an excited grin. He wants to test it first. The moment he closes his hand around the Lesser Stone of Mastery, brilliant purple energy bursts around his body. Even the little monkey hanging onto his hat gets caught in the glowing aura as system notifications confirm that the stone has successfully increased the proficiency of his farmer's warm touch skill. As the magical light fades, Sejun throws both hands into the air, shouting in excitement. It actually worked. Theo and Kwon cheer right alongside him while Sejun grins from ear to ear. Then another thought hits him. If one stone can do this, what happens if he uses all of them? Without wasting another second, Sejun begins consuming the remaining stones one after another. Purple energy erupts around him repeatedly as endless system notifications flood the screen, announcing skill proficiency increases, skill level ups, and continuous growth. Watching all those messages appear one after another, Sejun can barely contain himself. He excitedly shouts in amazement as his skills keep improving. When the notifications finally stop, Sejun pumps his fist into the air with a huge smile. Coming to the 77th floor was absolutely worth it. After enjoying the moment for a bit, he gradually calms down and remembers something important. They've been away from the 99th floor for quite a while now. With a cheerful smile, Sejun suggests it's finally time to head back home. But the moment he says that, something feels off. Confused, he glances around. Theo and Kwon have completely frozen. Both of them are staring somewhere in the distance with wide eyes and jaws hanging open. Completely confused by their reaction, Sejun asks what's wrong. Theo immediately points ahead and tells him to look. As Sejun turns around, another system notification suddenly appears. The restored banana trees are now repaying Sejun for saving them. A warm golden light washes across the entire grove as the monkeys begin dancing with excitement. Right before everyone's eyes, thick clusters of green bananas rapidly sprout from the trees. Within moments, they grow larger and larger until every tree is overflowing with bananas. Sejun can only stand there in amazement, quietly letting out a stunned wow. Theo and Kwon are just as speechless. The monkeys, however, completely lose it. They burst into tears of happiness, jumping around while joyfully chanting about bananas at the top of their lungs. The elderly monkey rushes over, grabs Sejun's arm with both hands, and tearfully thanks him from the bottom of his heart. Then, overflowing with gratitude, he insists that Sejun take the bananas, along with all of their precious mango and watermelon seeds, as a gift. Sejun smiles peacefully beneath his straw hat while the little monkey relaxes comfortably on top of his head. The scene then shifts to the grand headquarters of the Mage Association on the 91st floor. Outside, the elegant building stands beneath a gloomy gray sky, giving the whole place an uneasy atmosphere. Inside a lavish meeting room lit only by candles, several hooded figures are already gathered around a long table. As the doors open, one of them smirks and welcomes the newest arrival, calling him the star of the evening. Ganoba walks in, his expression calm and confident. One of the mages greets him as the new Tower Master of Gravity. Ganoba humbly laughs it off, saying none of this would have been possible without everyone's help. The meeting introduces the powerful figures sitting around the table. One is the stoic Rhino Tower Master of Destruction. Another is the sly raccoon tower master of Meteor. And the last is the grinning horse tower master of Flame. With everyone present, the conspirators begin congratulating Genoba. The horse mage praises him for pulling off such an incredible achievement. The raccoon can't hide his excitement, saying he never imagined Genoba would actually eliminate someone as powerful as Iona. The rhino speaks more seriously. He admits he never agreed with Iona's leadership in the first place. As president of the Mage Association, she should have been protecting the interests of mages, but instead she constantly cooperated with the Wandering Merchant Association, an organization that already held enormous influence throughout the tower. The raccoon eagerly agrees, arguing that she had become far too friendly with them. The horse lets out a satisfied chuckle, saying he's simply glad everything has finally been put back in order. Genoba listens quietly before steering the conversation toward what really matters. With ambition burning in his eyes, he calmly announces that he'll clean up everything Iona left behind, as the new president of the Mage Association. The room immediately falls silent. The rhino slowly turns toward him, clearly caught off guard, and repeats the title in disbelief. The new president of the Mage Association? Genoba simply answers yes. Then his expression hardens. Looking around the table with a cold, intimidating stare, he asks if anyone has a problem with that. The pressure in the room instantly becomes overwhelming. The rhino, who had questioned him just moments ago, breaks into a nervous sweat. The raccoon reacts even faster. Throwing up both hands, he hurriedly insists that of course they have no objections. In fact, he says someone as capable as Lord Genoba is the obvious choice to become the next president. Not wanting to be left behind, the horse mage immediately joins in, enthusiastically agreeing that no one else could possibly be more qualified. Sensing the tension, he quickly changes the subject altogether. With an exaggerated smile, he announces that he's prepared a special feast to celebrate this historic occasion and calls for the food to be brought in. A white dog chef wheels over a luxurious golden serving cart carrying a covered silver platter, a bottle of expensive wine, and several glasses. The moment the platter is placed before him, Genoba's intimidating expression melts into a smug grin. Laughing modestly, he pretends the celebration is unnecessary. The horse personally uncorks the wine and carefully fills Genoba's glass, flattering him by saying it's the least they could do after all his hard work. Clearly enjoying every second of the attention, Genoba raises his wine glass. With complete satisfaction, he proposes a toast. The other tower masters immediately lift their own glasses, thanking him for everything he's done. Then Genoba delivers one final toast. Looking down at the swirling red wine, he mockingly wishes Lady Iona eternal rest, making sure to emphasize that she should get some good rest. The conspirators clink their glasses together, sealing their alliance. After taking a long, satisfied drink, Genoba lets out a contented sigh before reaching eagerly for the meal prepared in his honor. Grinning greedily, he lifts the silver lid from the serving platter, and instantly freezes. Instead of food, Iona is casually sitting on the platter. She lounges comfortably beside a bunch of grapes, happily eating as though she were the guest of honor instead of the meal. For several long seconds, Genoba can only stare at her in complete disbelief. Still chewing calmly, Iona lets out a cute little laugh before smiling at him. With perfect timing, she thanks him for the good rest, and addresses him by his full title. Vice Tower Master Genoba. The room goes completely silent. The rhino's face drains of all color as he stares at Iona in absolute horror. Completely unfazed, Iona casually reaches over, grabs another grape, and pops it into her mouth. Then the atmosphere changes. A dark, overwhelming aura begins spreading from her tiny body. She slowly taps her chin, fixes Genoba with a piercing stare, and calmly asks if she heard correctly. Was he saying he was the new president of the Mage Association? In an instant, every bit of confidence disappears from Genoba's face. His smug smile vanishes. Cold sweat pours down his forehead as his eyes widen in pure terror, and he lets out a horrified scream. Subscribe. Comment. The rhino mage can barely believe what he's seeing. Covered in cold sweat, he points at the tiny hamster sitting comfortably beside a bunch of grapes and stammers in disbelief, asking how Lady Iona could possibly still be alive. Meanwhile, Iona looks completely relaxed, as if she has simply shown up for dinner. She casually turns toward Genoba with an almost friendly smile and asks if he's been pulling some cute little tricks behind her back. The way she says it is so calm that somehow it feels even more threatening. Genoba, on the other hand, is drenched in sweat. His confident smile disappears completely as the pressure starts crushing him from the inside. Realizing his entire plan has collapsed, Genoba grits his teeth so hard they almost crack. Then, completely losing his composure, he jumps out of his chair, points his wand straight at Iona, and desperately screams for everyone to kill her. The order catches the other conspirators off guard for a split second, but they quickly understand there's no turning back now. One after another, they raise their wands and prepare to bombard the tiny hamster with magic. Iona doesn't even flinch. Instead, she calmly begins chanting a gravity spell. The room suddenly fills with dense purple mana before she raises her staff and unleashes gravity control. The effect is immediate. An overwhelming force slams every single traitor face first into the table and floor. Candlesticks, dishes, and furniture crash everywhere while the mages groan in pain, completely unable to lift so much as a finger. Meanwhile, Iona floats effortlessly above the wreckage, looking down at them almost curiously as she asks whether they really wanted her position that badly. Then, with an unbelievably cheerful smile, she casually says she's perfectly willing to hand over both of her titles, the President of the Mage Association and the Tower Master of Gravity. She pauses just long enough for hope to appear in their eyes, before asking if they're actually prepared for everything that comes with those titles. A playful little QQQ escapes her mouth as she warns them that they may end up having nightmares every single night. Pinned helplessly under the crushing gravity, the conspirators immediately start turning on each other. The horse mage desperately blames everything on Ganoba, insisting they were manipulated from the beginning. The rhino mage angrily calls everyone incompetent, but Iona cuts through all of it with one cold sentence. It doesn't matter anymore. Floating gracefully in the air while pink magical energy spirals around her, she smiles sweetly and repeats that she'll gladly give them exactly what they wanted. In exchange for one small condition. The atmosphere instantly changes. The room darkens into a deep crimson, and Iona's voice echoes with absolute authority as she reveals the true burden behind her position. If they want her titles, then first they have to face the ancient demon king sealed inside her inner world. Every conspirator goes completely pale. The rhino mage finally realizes why Iona has always been so overwhelmingly powerful. She didn't simply defeat an ancient demon king. She sealed him inside herself. The tiny raccoon mage trembles in horror as everything suddenly makes sense. Still smiling as innocently as ever, Iona explains that she chose to shoulder this burden herself because someone had to protect the Black Tower. In her eyes, that's exactly what the president of the Mage Association is supposed to do. While the conspirators continue groaning helplessly beneath the gravity spell, Iona casually admits that this whole incident is actually convenient. Since they're so eager to replace her, maybe she can finally retire from carrying such a heavy responsibility. Then her expression changes. Her eyes narrow into a mischievous grin, and with a chilling smile she leaves them with one final message. When they meet the Demon King, tell him she said hello. A brilliant flash erupts across the room. Crimson mist floods every corner as her magic completely engulfs the conspirators, banishing them into her inner world. In the next instant, they find themselves standing inside a dark, barren wasteland. The ground is cracked and lifeless. Endless darkness stretches in every direction. Clutching their wands, they nervously look around while one of them asks where they even are. The rhino mage slowly pieces it together and realizes they're actually inside Iona's inner world. The horse mage can only mutter a terrified curse as the horrifying truth sinks in. Then, a deep, monstrous growl echoes through the endless darkness. Every mage freezes. A gigantic shadow slowly emerges before them. Its hollow black eyes stare straight into their souls while its enormous mouth hangs open in a terrifying scream. Massive ghostly hands reach toward them as the entire wasteland trembles beneath its presence. Refusing to surrender, Ganoba steps forward. He roars the name of his spell and unleashes a violent bolt of black lightning straight into the creature's chest. Ganoba mocked the creature. For a brief moment, the raccoon mage mistakes the situation entirely, believing Ganoba is somehow powerful enough to stand against the monster. That admiration lasts only seconds. Reality quickly catches up, and every conspirator suddenly realizes they're trapped here because Ganoba completely failed to kill Iona. Immediately, they all start blaming him. The raccoon mage furiously accuses him of dragging everyone into this nightmare. The horse mage reminds him that he confidently claimed Iona was already dead. Cornered from every direction, Ganoba finally snaps and screams at all of them to shut up. A deep voice calmly observes that none of them are Iona. The entire group slowly looks upward. Cold sweat runs down every face. They're finally hearing the voice of the ancient demon king himself. Then another horrifying realization hits them. Iona isn't even here. She's left them alone with this monster. Rather than backing down, Ganoba lets his ambition take over once again. Pointing his wand at the darkness, he boldly declares that he's stronger than Iona and demands the Demon King's power, arrogantly offering to become his new master instead. Even the Rhino Mage is stunned by how fearless, or reckless, that statement is. A deep, mocking laugh echoes across the wasteland. The sky suddenly tears apart. Jagged cracks spread through the darkness itself as horrifying clay-like creatures begin bubbling up from the ground. The Demon King coldly tells them they've become far too arrogant. Iona was never his master. She simply agreed to become his playmate, endlessly enduring this nightmare to keep him sealed away. The horrifying truth drains every bit of color from the conspirators' faces. Then comes the final sentence. Since Iona isn't here, they'll take her place instead. Instantly, countless shadowy monsters rise from the earth and rush toward the trapped mages. Complete chaos erupts. The creatures swarm them from every direction, dragging them toward a burning abyss while desperate screams echo across the wasteland. Fire bursts around them as every conspirator struggles helplessly against the overwhelming horde. As shadowy hands begin reaching for him, Ganoba's confidence finally shatters. For the first time, he understands exactly what Iona has been carrying all this time. Every single night, whenever she slept. She willingly endured this endless nightmare just to keep the Demon King contained. Back in the real world, though, the contrast couldn't be more ridiculous. While every traitor is trapped inside the nightmare, their bodies are still lying unconscious across the ruined dining room. Ganoba is rolling around on the floor in his sleep, crying and begging for mercy. Meanwhile, Iona is stretched out comfortably on the table, happily eating fruit, humming to herself like she's enjoying a relaxing picnic. With a proud little smile, she casually remarks that being the Black Tower's strongest mage certainly isn't an easy job before letting out another adorable little QQQ. Standing before a glowing magical gateway, Sejun points ahead and tells everyone that they've finally reached the 77th floor's waypoint. Floating in front of the group is a massive blue crystal humming with magical energy, the checkpoint that will let him connect this floor to the rest of the tower. Before leaving, though, Sejun scratches his head with an awkward smile and admits he feels a little guilty. After all, they showed up, turned the entire floor upside down, and now they're already leaving. Goran immediately laughs it off. He tells Sejun there's no reason to apologize because he was the one who caused the drought in the first place and nearly ruined the entire floor. Even the Monkey King folds his arms with an unimpressed look, almost teasing Goran for calling himself the boss of the 77th floor after making such a huge mess. Goran can only let out a helpless sigh before glancing toward his daughter. At least, he says, Garina finally seems to have learned something from everything that happened. Garina immediately turns her head away with a stubborn little humph, clearly too embarrassed to admit it out loud. Then something completely unexpected happens. Both Goran and Garina suddenly blink in confusion as Kwon quietly waddles over to them. The little bear politely lowers his head and sincerely apologizes for hitting both of them during the fight. Then, almost as an afterthought, he sweetly adds that he's especially sorry to big sister Garina. That single sentence completely catches her off guard. Her eyes go wide as she stares at the innocent little bear. Kwon simply smiles his usual bright smile and tells her not to be discouraged. He says she's strong, she always works hard, and someday someone will definitely love her for exactly who she is. Until then, waiting for that special person can be exciting, just like searching for treasure. That heartfelt encouragement completely breaks Garina's defenses. Her eyes instantly fill with tears as she rushes over and wraps Kwon in a huge hug, crying his name while squeezing the poor little bear with all her strength. Watching the scene, Sejun can't help smiling warmly, while Theo proudly comments that Kwon really is the sweetest little guy around. Once the emotional farewell settles down, Sejun walks over to the enormous blue crystal and places his hand against its glowing surface. The crystal immediately responds. Blue system windows appear one after another, confirming that the 77th floor waypoint has successfully been registered and that travel routes between the 1st and 99th floors have now been synchronized. But before he can celebrate, another system alert suddenly appears. Apparently, because he became the very first person in the tower's history to travel downward through the floors, he's unlocked a brand new title. Retrograde. Before Sejun can even process what that means, colorful light erupts around his entire body. The system announces that the title permanently increases all of his stats by 22. Sejun stares at himself in disbelief before wondering if the bonus matches the exact number of floors he descended. If that's really how it works, that's an incredible reward. His thoughts are interrupted when Theo stands on his hind legs, dramatically waving his paw while complaining that they should hurry already because it's way too hot out here. Kwon, carrying his bag behind him, looks just as ready to leave, so Sejun laughs and agrees it's time to head home. He turns back toward everyone on the 77th floor and gives them one final wave, thanking them for everything and saying he hopes they'll meet again someday. Even Bat flutters through the air while Kwon cheerfully waves back. The farewell quickly becomes a lively scene. Goran waves his massive arm while telling them they're welcome back anytime. Garina happily waves with both hands, the Monkey King enthusiastically joins in, and the little monkeys bounce around excitedly while chattering their goodbyes. With one last smile, Sejun steps into the glowing portal. Blue light swirls around his straw hat and clothes before completely engulfing him, and in a flash, he's gone. The story immediately shifts away from the tower to Kenya. Inside a meeting room, Ngugi stands before a large display showing devastating images of destroyed villages, barren farmland, and widespread damage. He reports that massive locust outbreaks are now spreading across both Nigeria and Cameroon. The screen switches to footage from Lagos port, where enormous glowing green locusts swarm over shipping containers. Investigators have already identified the food distribution center there as the outbreak's main source. Ngugi turns toward Han Tae-jun to discuss their next move. Before he can continue, Han calmly points out something far more concerning. The locusts have already started developing yellow spots. Ngugi immediately freezes. Breaking into a cold sweat, he quietly asks if Han is saying they're about to evolve. Han confirms it without hesitation. He explains that as locust populations continue increasing, they naturally undergo an evolution. While the green ones are dangerous, they're still comparable to oversized grasshoppers. The yellow ones are an entirely different story. Once they evolve, their bodies become so durable that even an ordinary adult would struggle to kill a single one. The explanation makes the room noticeably heavier. Without wasting another second, Han orders that every harvested green onion be processed immediately and that defensive lines be established around Nigeria and Cameroon as fast as possible. Ngugi nods firmly. Despite the obvious tension on his face, he promises to mobilize every available person right away. After issuing the orders, Han quietly pinches the bridge of his nose. On the surface, he appears calm. But deep down, he knows something the others don't. The locusts themselves aren't the real nightmare. The scene changes one last time. Far away, beneath the bright blue sky, a massive cargo ship steadily sails across the calm ocean as if everything is perfectly normal. At first glance, nothing seems unusual. Then the camera lowers toward the front of the ship. Attached beneath the bow is a gigantic green mass stretching directly into the sea. As the view sinks beneath the water's surface, the horrifying truth is finally revealed. The growth isn't seaweed at all. It's an enormous swarm of glowing green locusts clinging to the ship's hull. Countless insects writhe together beneath the waves, their buzzing echoing through the water as they churn the sea into white foam, silently hitching a ride across the ocean while the cargo ship continues sailing forward, completely unaware of the catastrophe it's carrying.
Like, share.
The massive blue teleportation crystal begins glowing brilliantly beneath the clear sky, its magical energy building as it activates the return portal. Nearby, Uma tilts his head curiously toward the other minotaurs, letting out a questioning grunt as if wondering whether Sejun's group has finally made it back. A moment later, the portal fully opens. Sejun steps through first with his arms spread wide and a huge smile, happily announcing that they're finally home. Right behind him, the two minotaurs carry everything they brought back from the 77th floor, while Bat flutters cheerfully beside them. Theo and Kwon walk proudly at the front as well, clearly excited to be back on familiar ground after everything they went through. Uma warmly welcomes them home, commenting that they successfully brought Sejun back safely. Theo immediately steps forward with his usual confidence and proudly confirms that mission accomplished. Then Uma suddenly freezes. His nose twitches. A powerful, unbelievably sweet scent reaches him, making his eyes widen in complete surprise. Pointing straight toward the minotaurs carrying the supplies, he urgently asks what in the world smells so incredibly sweet. Bat happily answers before anyone else can. He explains that it's a delicious fruit called a banana that they brought back all the way from the 77th floor. That answer only leaves Uma even more stunned. Sweat appears on his face as he wonders how something that smells this amazing could possibly have come from such a place. Before long, both Uma and another nearby minotaur are practically drooling, staring at the bananas with sparkling eyes like they've already fallen in love with them just from the smell alone. Watching their over-the-top reaction, Sejun can't help letting out a small amused laugh. He thoughtfully rubs his chin and explains that they originally planned to keep the bananas for themselves, but after seeing everyone's reaction, maybe they should share after all. Kwon looks up at him with wide, curious eyes, wondering what he's thinking. Then Sejun suddenly breaks into a bright grin. Feeling generous, he tells Ox 3 and Ox 4 to start handing the bananas out to everyone. The next moment turns into complete chaos. Bananas start flying through the air as minotaurs eagerly scramble to catch them, while Uma watches the unexpected food frenzy with total confusion. Kwon, on the other hand, immediately panics. Watching his precious bananas disappear one after another, he starts sweating and desperately shouts for everyone to leave some for him. Sejun simply smiles before gently patting the little bear on the head. He reassures Kwon that there's no need to worry anymore. Since the banana farm now belongs to them, they can always return to the 77th floor and harvest as many bananas as they want. That thought is enough to calm Kwon down. With that settled, Sejun smiles to himself and says they've been away from home long enough, so it's finally time to get back to work. Just then, a bright blue notification suddenly appears in front of him. Far away in her room, Eileen's face pops up through the magical communication orb. The moment she sees Sejun, her eyes light up with relief as she happily cheers that he's finally back. Sejun smiles warmly and greets her right away, assuring her that he returns safely without any problems. Hearing that, Aileen visibly relaxes before immediately leaning closer and asking whether anything happened during the trip. Sejun lets out a small tired sigh and honestly admits, a lot happened. That answer instantly catches Aileen off guard. Seeing her reaction, Sejun quickly smiles again and explains that everything turned out fine because everyone helped him along the way. Behind him, the minotaurs continue passing bananas around while Theo and Kwon happily enjoy the fruits of their adventure. Aileen proudly points out that she helped too before curiously asking whether Sejun checked out the new authority she bought for him. Sejun happily nods. He says he already did, and thanks to it, his magical power increased by an incredible amount. Everything seems perfectly normal. Until Sejun casually changes the subject. With a slightly mischievous smile, he mentions noticing that a huge amount of his tower coin savings disappeared to pay for that authority. The instant those words leave his mouth, Aileen completely panics. A guilty sweat rolls down her face as she realizes exactly where this conversation is heading. Desperately trying to escape, she suddenly starts pretending the communication signal is breaking up, loudly complaining that she can't hear him properly anymore. Sejun watches her performance with a knowing smirk. He's clearly not fooled for even a second. Embarrassed beyond belief, Aileen hurriedly blurts out a quick goodbye before abruptly cutting the connection herself, leaving only a fading pulse of blue light inside the communication orb. Sejun stares at the now silent orb for a moment before chuckling to himself. The funny part is, he was actually about to tell her that everything was completely fine and that he wasn't upset at all. Meanwhile, back in her own room, Aileen buries her face in her hands and groans dramatically, overwhelmed with regret over the massive amount of tower coins she spent, completely convinced she had just gotten herself into trouble. Meanwhile, back on the farm, things have somehow fallen into complete chaos. Queen Bee hovers above the fields while Killian loudly boasts that he managed to handle everything himself. Down below, Papa Rabbit looks up in surprise, with the little yellow rabbit and a couple of mushroom ants standing nearby, equally confused by all the commotion. Killian and Kaiser are standing face to face, pointing their massive claws at each other as they argue at the top of their lungs over how the farm should be managed. Killian insists that the mushroom ants should be the ones assigned to the fieldwork. Kaiser immediately shoots that idea down, arguing that the rabbits are far more experienced and should handle the job instead. Neither of them is willing to budge even an inch. Watching two ridiculously powerful dragons argue over farm labor is almost surreal, but Papa Rabbit isn't laughing. He breaks into a nervous sweat, worrying that without Sejun around to stop them, this is about to end very badly. Behind him, the tiny yellow rabbit nervously squeaks while trying to stay out of trouble. The argument only gets worse. Killian glares at Kaiser and firmly declares that he's obviously the one who's right. Kaiser bares his teeth and fires right back, telling Killian to quit being so stubborn. That one word instantly pushes Killian over the edge. A blazing crimson aura erupts around him as he furiously warns Kaiser never to call him stubborn again unless he's looking for a fight. Unfortunately, Kaiser has absolutely no intention of backing down. His own blue and black aura explodes outward as his patience finally runs out too. The next second, the two terrifying dragons slam into each other head-on. Their overwhelming red and blue energies collide with explosive force, sending violent shockwaves tearing across the farm. Dust erupts everywhere. Papa Rabbit desperately grabs onto his hat before the wind blows it away, convinced the farm is about to be destroyed all over again. The little yellow rabbit, Queen Bee, and even the mushroom ants scramble around in panic as the battlefield turns into complete mayhem. Then, a familiar voice cuts straight through the chaos. Someone sternly demands to know exactly what they think they're doing. The effect is immediate. Both dragons freeze on the spot. Sejun has returned. Walking calmly into the clearing, Sejun reminds them that fighting is absolutely forbidden on his farm. Theo sits comfortably on his shoulder, while Kwang and Bat follow close behind. The moment Kaiser sees him, he immediately calms down. As if nothing happened, he casually remarks that it looks like everyone made it back safely. Papa Rabbit practically lights up with relief. With a huge smile, he happily welcomes Master Sejun home while the tiny yellow rabbit clings tightly to his back. Queen Bee buzzes excitedly over to Sejun as well, cheerfully welcoming him back. Sejun laughs warmly before asking how things have been while he was away. Papa Rabbit replies that, for the most part, everything has been going well. The wording immediately makes both Kaiser and Killian break into guilty sweats. Apparently, they know exactly why he emphasized for the most part. Looking around, Sejun notices that despite everything, the tomato fields look healthier than ever. He smiles with genuine satisfaction, impressed by how beautiful the farm has become while he was gone. Papa Rabbit proudly crosses his arms and says it's only because Sejun trusted everyone enough to leave the farm in their hands. The tiny yellow rabbit and the mushroom ants eagerly nod along beside him. The mushroom ants excitedly start talking about how wonderful life has become. Compared to working under the fire ants, this place feels like paradise. They can eat delicious crops, get plenty of rest, and actually enjoy themselves instead of constantly struggling. They even proudly point to the mushrooms growing on their backs, explaining that the nutritious food has made them healthier than ever. Theo happily agrees with a cheerful meow from Sejun's shoulder. Seeing everyone so happy, Sejun smiles to himself before another idea suddenly pops into his head. If the crops already taste this good, why not make them even better? Grinning, he suggests cooking a huge meal using everything they've harvested. Everyone immediately gathers around to hear what he's planning. Then Sejun raises a finger with an excited smile and officially announces that today, they're having a party. Theo instantly perks up. Kwang, however, tilts his head in complete confusion. Bat looks just as puzzled as a giant question mark practically appears over both of them. Neither of them has any idea what a party even is. Theo eagerly jumps in to explain. He tells them that a party means eating lots of delicious food, dancing together, and simply having fun, kind of like celebrating a great harvest. The explanation is all Kwon needs. His eyes immediately sparkle. Throwing both paws into the air, he excitedly declares that if parties are like that, then they should have one every single day. Bat enthusiastically claps along, completely sold on the idea too. Sejun bursts into laughter at Kwon's innocent enthusiasm before asking everyone if there's a particular dish they'd like him to make. Theo is the first to answer, immediately requesting grilled fish. Papa Rabbit enthusiastically votes for carrot soup. Meanwhile, the mushroom ants quietly look at each other, completely confused because they've never even heard of cooking before. Killian and Kaiser simply stand off to the side, silently watching the lively discussion unfold. Bat happily asks for plenty of fruit. Kwon, meanwhile, is drooling so much he can barely think straight. Instead of naming one dish, he enthusiastically declares that he wants absolutely everything. Laughing at everyone's excitement, Sejun pumps his fist with a big smile and tells the whole group it's time to start getting everything ready for the party. The campfire crackled away in the middle of the forest, filling the air with the mouth-watering smell of 2 large fish slowly roasting over the flames until they turned a perfect golden brown. Theo was already drooling buckets, practically bouncing with excitement as he kept talking about how incredible everything looked. Around the fire, Kwon held onto one of the skewers while Papa Rabbit, the mushroom ants, Queen Bee, another bee, and Bat all gathered together. Nearby, a chubby rabbit happily pushed a wheelbarrow overflowing with fresh carrots, with a basket packed full of sweet corn sitting right beside it. The whole place already felt like a proper celebration. Then the peaceful atmosphere was shattered when Garen suddenly came sprinting out of the forest at full speed, desperately shouting for Master Theo. Theo turned around in surprise before letting out an awkward sigh, realizing he'd completely forgotten about the little blue frog during all the excitement. Gently stopping him by the head, Theo admitted it was his fault, and Garen looked visibly relieved just to have finally caught up. Feeling embarrassed, Garen blamed himself instead, saying he simply wasn't fast enough to keep up with everyone. Curious, Theo asked why he hadn't followed them to the 77th floor in the first place. Garen started explaining his reason. But before he could even finish, another interruption arrived. Killian loudly announced that he wanted an invitation to the party too. Kaiser immediately exploded, roaring that Killian wasn't even invited into the Black Tower in the first place. The shout was so sudden that it even startled Theo. Not about to back down, Killian fired right back, calling Kaiser petty to the core and accusing him of acting like a sore loser. Just like that, the atmosphere went from cozy campfire to another dragon argument. Seeing things getting out of hand, Sejun walked over and reminded both of them that parties and fighting simply don't mix. Killian ignored the warning and looked straight at Sejun, insisting he wanted to join everyone, eat good food, drink, and enjoy himself. Sejun admitted he wasn't convinced yet, pointing out that Killian still seemed far too hostile toward everyone else. That answer clearly frustrated Killian. After grumbling to himself for a moment, he suddenly barked at Sejun to take this, unleashing a blinding burst of red magical energy. For a split second, it looked like he had launched some terrifying attack. Sejun froze in complete shock as the brilliant light surrounded him, wondering what on earth Killian had just done. But instead of some world-ending spell, a lump of soft white dough quietly appeared. A system window immediately popped up, revealing this wasn't ordinary dough at all. It was the wealth-consuming rice dough, an incredibly rare AA-grade artifact created by the legendary rice cake artisan Bok of a White Rabbit tribe. Only 10 of these artifacts existed in the entire Black Tower. By consuming the equivalent of 1 tower coin, it could produce 1 kilogram of top-quality rice dough, though it normally required level 500 and at least 50 magic to use. Sejun stared at the artifact with a huge sweat drop, amazed that something this valuable could literally turn money into premium rice dough. Even Queen Bee floated over for a closer look. Kaiser immediately pointed an accusing finger at Killian, calling him a thief for stealing an artifact from the Black Tower's treasure vault. Killian didn't seem bothered at all. He casually explained that greed had told him he could take whatever he wanted from the vault anyway. Then, scratching his cheek with an oddly shy expression, he admitted he picked this one simply because it looked soft, clean, and surprisingly nice. Sejun looked down at the artifact for a moment, then walked over to Killian with a smile. Instead of getting angry, he officially invited Killian to the party. Kaiser was absolutely speechless. He immediately protested, accusing Sejun of accepting a cheap bribe. But Sejun shook his head and explained this wasn't just any gift. Thanks to this artifact, they could finally make unlimited rice dough again, which meant they could produce garetiak and makjiali just like the raccoons used to sell. The moment everyone realized what that actually meant, the argument vanished instantly. Kaiser and Killian forgot they had been ready to fight just seconds earlier. Their eyes lit up with excitement as they enthusiastically cheered for the delicious food waiting ahead, while Kwon, Garen, Theo, and Queen Bee happily danced together, already looking forward to the feast. Subscribe. Comment. Killian's eyes lit up the moment Sejun mentioned they could keep making makjiali. Leaning in with obvious excitement, He asked if that was really possible, and Sejun happily confirmed it while holding up the mysterious rice dough artifact. The explanation immediately gave Killian an idea. If the artifact only needed tower coins to work, then money wasn't going to be a problem. Sejun had absolutely no clue where this was going, but Killian suddenly erupted with a blazing red aura and proudly declared that he'd invest 10 million tower coins on the spot. The next second, the sky literally started raining money. An endless torrent of gold coins poured down from above, completely burying Sejun beneath a mountain of wealth before he even had time to react. Only one lonely hand stuck out from the pile, desperately waving around while muffled squeaks came from underneath. Even Queen Bee just hovered there in stunned disbelief, wondering how anyone could possibly end up getting crushed by money. A few moments later, Sejun finally popped his head out of the pile, immediately spitting a coin out of his mouth before laughing the whole thing off. He reassured everyone he was perfectly fine, joking that he'd never expected to experience an actual cash shower. Queen Bee, however, was far less amused and kept anxiously checking whether he was hurt, while Theo and Garen watched the ridiculous spectacle from a safe distance. Then the laughter came to an abrupt stop. The enormous mountain of coins suddenly began trembling. Sejun stared in confusion just as the harmless-looking rice dough artifact suddenly opened an enormous mouth and started devouring the entire fortune like a hungry black hole. Sejun instantly panicked, desperately yelling at it to slow down, but it ignored him completely. Within moments, nearly every single coin had disappeared into the artifact, which swelled into an enormous bloated blob that looked ready to burst. Theo rushed over in a complete panic, asking what they were supposed to do now as the oversized dough wobbled and squished around, making strange noises while processing the absurd amount of wealth it had just consumed. Then everything happened at once. The giant blob rapidly compressed inward before erupting upward like a rocket, blasting into the sky. Everyone could only stare in shock as it floated overhead before expanding once again into an enormous sphere. Sejun looked up in horror, realizing the gigantic ball was now falling straight back toward them. Theo completely lost it, running around in circles while screaming that the thing was about to crush everyone. Kaiser, meanwhile, looked thoroughly unimpressed. Muttering that the foolish white lizard had caused yet another disaster, he spread his massive wings and launched into the sky. Gathering an overwhelming vortex of blue energy into his claw, Kaiser calmly uttered a single command. Annihilate. A blinding explosion lit up the sky as his attack smashed straight through the gigantic dough ball, erasing it completely. As the brilliant light slowly faded away, Sejun, Theo and Kwang looked up in amazement, relieved that the looming disaster had vanished before it could hit the farm. Killian, however, looked absolutely heartbroken, lamenting the loss of his tower coins. Kaiser wasted no time reminding him that those coins were never his to begin with, bluntly accusing him of stealing them from the 55th floor's treasure vault anyway. Back on the ground, Theo and Kwang discovered the rice dough artifact lying there completely deflated like an exhausted balloon. Sejun picked it up and sighed, realizing he'd have to be incredibly careful whenever he decided to use this artifact again. Before long, the atmosphere shifted back to something much more relaxing. A cozy campfire crackled in the clearing while fish roasted over the flames and several sweet potatoes cooked beneath green leaves. Theo sat eagerly beside the fire, impatiently asking Kwang if dinner was finally ready. Kwang picked up one of the steaming hot sweet potatoes, carefully blowing on it before breaking it cleanly in half. After inspecting the inside, he disappointedly concluded that it still wasn't fully cooked. Then, without warning, both halves floated right out of his paws. Wrapped in glowing purple magic, the sweet potatoes drifted into the air as a familiar voice calmly instructed him to hand them over. Everyone looked up to see Iona floating above them. With effortless grace, she raised her staff and cast a simple fire spell, bathing the sweet potatoes in perfectly controlled flames. Kwang hurriedly grabbed them back, only to immediately regret it as the scorching heat made him frantically hop around yelling that they were burning hot. Theo, on the other hand, lit up with excitement. Iona! You're back! Looking around the lively farm, Iona smiled softly and remarked that things seemed unusually lively today. In every direction, everyone was busy preparing food. Scythe Rabbit was working away, Mushroom Ants carried baskets full of sweet potatoes, Rabbits loaded carts with supplies, and the entire farm buzzed with activity. Theo proudly explained that Chairman Park was throwing a celebration for everyone's safe return from the 77th floor. Nearby, Sejun enthusiastically experimented with his new abilities, using an ice cube to instantly freeze honey into neat golden blocks. The perfectly frozen cubes landed on the grass, drawing amazed applause from Queen Bee and the nearby rabbits. Unfortunately, Sejun immediately started fumbling them, slipping around while trying to juggle the frozen honey. Watching from behind, Iona couldn't help sweat dropping as she silently questioned why someone was using an incredibly valuable holy stone for something so ridiculously chaotic. Theo then asked if there was anything Iona wanted to eat, confidently promising that Chairman Park could cook whatever she liked. Iona honestly admitted she couldn't think of anything. Theo immediately dug through his oversized bag before pulling out a handful of shelled peanuts, proudly saying he'd had a feeling she'd enjoy these. Iona cautiously picked one up and took a tiny bite. Her eyes instantly sparkled. A huge smile spread across her face as she happily declared them delicious, asking for more. Theo burst into laughter, delighted to see such an adorable reaction from the normally composed hamster mage. But her peaceful snack break lasted only a few seconds. A thunderous roar suddenly echoed across the farm. Park Sejun. Killian's gigantic figure towered over the clearing, loudly demanding to know whether the food was finally ready. The unexpected roar startled Iona so badly that she immediately pulled out her staff and gathered purple magic, wondering why there was a white dragon standing in the middle of the black tower. Theo practically screamed as he frantically waved both paws, assuring her that everything was completely fine. Meanwhile, Sejun simply pointed straight at the enormous dragon and firmly scolded him. He reminded Killian that parties were supposed to be enjoyed together, not by someone selfishly demanding food before everyone else. Killian instantly deflated. Embarrassed, he scratched his head and quietly admitted he was simply starving. Seeing his attitude change, Sejun smiled and handed him a freshly roasted sweet potato, suggesting he eat that while the rest of the meal finished cooking. Killian gratefully accepted it, then shyly asked if he could maybe have just one more. Watching this unbelievable interaction unfold, Iona could only stare in complete disbelief. Theo proudly explained that Chairman Park had even formed a contract with a white dragon. That revelation left Iona speechless. Looking over at Sejun standing there beneath the bright blue sky, smiling warmly beneath his straw hat while casually getting along with creatures that should have been impossible to tame, she quietly found herself wondering just how extraordinary this human really was. A shimmering blue portal opens in midair, and 2 freshly roasted sweet potatoes drop straight through it. Waiting on the other side is Killian's real body, now in his humanoid form with long white hair and towering horns. He catches them effortlessly, takes one look at the steaming sweet potato, and immediately digs in. The first bite is enough to make him grin with satisfaction before he suddenly calls out for Ajax to come over. A glowing portal opens again, and Ajax comes running out looking like he's been through a rough day. Covered in dirt and clearly exhausted, he asks his grandfather why he called him over. Then, almost defensively, he points out that he's been extremely busy working on his farm. Killian raises an eyebrow with a teasing smirk and asks a simple question. So, can you show me even one crop you've successfully grown? That question instantly corners Ajax. He awkwardly pouts, breaks into a nervous sweat, and mumbles that, well, it isn't harvest season yet. Killian lets out a tired sigh before asking why Ajax insisted on becoming a tower farmer in the first place. Looking away in embarrassment, Ajax quietly admits he honestly believed he'd naturally be good at everything simply because he's a mighty white dragon. Trying to defend himself, he explains that the problem isn't him, the crops just can't handle his overwhelming dragon energy. A quick flashback even shows him standing in a barren field, confidently pointing at a patch of dying sprouts while commanding them to grow faster, only for absolutely nothing to happen. Seeing his grandson looking so discouraged, Killian's expression softens. He hands Ajax one of the roasted sweet potatoes and tells him to give it a try, explaining that it's a crop called a sweet potato. Ajax curiously repeats the unfamiliar name as he studies the warm food in his hands. After a brief moment, he takes a huge bite. The reaction is immediate. His eyes shoot wide open in complete disbelief. With genuine excitement, Ajax blurts out that it's unbelievably delicious. Watching his grandson enjoy it so much, Killian can't help smiling warmly. He gently pats Ajax on the head and encourages him to eat plenty, regain his strength, and someday grow crops just as amazing himself. Ajax eagerly agrees, happily continuing his meal while Killian watches with quiet satisfaction, clearly proud of him. Meanwhile, back at Sejun's farm, preparations for the party continue without slowing down. Near the campfire, 3 rabbits and a mushroom ant gather around 2 enormous blocks of ice with golden honey frozen inside. Nearby, Sejun samples the large pot of simmering purple soup with a wooden ladle. After tasting it, he nods in satisfaction. The soup is coming along nicely. Holding up another spoonful, he happily mentions that he added lots of carrots just like Papa Rabbit requested, making Papa Rabbit squeak with excitement. Then Sejun remembers Bat-Bat's earlier request. Smiling, he asks if they should finally go pick the fruit Bat-Bat wanted so badly. Bat-Bat immediately flutters around excitedly, practically vibrating with happiness. The group soon arrives at a beautiful pineapple field. Golden pineapples cover the area, and Sejun crosses his arms with an impressed smile, commenting that these finally look like the pineapples he's familiar with. Theo sits comfortably on his shoulder while Kwon happily cheers nearby. As Sejun walks deeper into the field, one especially enormous pineapple catches his attention. He leans in for a closer look, amazed by just how massive it is. Without hesitation, he decides that's the one he'll harvest. Gripping the fruit firmly, Sejun pulls it free and proudly lifts it over his head, celebrating his very first successful pineapple harvest while Theo, Bat-Bat, and Kwon cheer beside him. Almost immediately, a blue system notification appears. It announces that Sejun has successfully harvested a screaming pineapple, rewards him with job EXP, and increases his harvesting proficiency to level 6. Sejun and Theo immediately freeze. Both of them stare at the notification with matching confused expressions. Screaming pineapple? Before either of them can even begin to process that ridiculous name, the pineapple suddenly starts changing. Still resting in Sejun's hands, a long horizontal slit slowly splits open across the middle of the fruit. Then, it takes a deep breath. A brilliant golden light bursts from inside the pineapple as Sejun and Theo stand completely frozen, eyes wide with terror, silently bracing themselves for whatever terrifying sound this very appropriately named fruit is about to unleash.
Like, share.
The moment Sejun harvests the strange pineapple, it suddenly splits open in his hand and erupts with an intense burst of golden light. The flash is so overwhelming that Sejun instinctively flinches, expecting the worst. Theo grabs onto his shoulder and squeezes his eyes shut, bracing for whatever disaster this bizarre fruit is about to unleash. Thankfully, before anything can go wrong, a shimmering protective barrier instantly surrounds them. Sejun slowly opens his eyes and lets out a huge sigh of relief when he realizes they're completely safe. Looking over, he sees Iona calmly holding her glowing purple staff. Theo immediately recognizes what happened and happily praises her for protecting everyone. Iona simply smiles with quiet pride, looking pleased that her magic arrived just in time. Still catching his breath, Sejun wipes the sweat from his forehead and sincerely thanks her for the save. Instead of making a big deal out of it, Iona suddenly becomes adorably shy. She lightly taps her chin and politely asks if, as a reward, she could have a few more peanuts. Sejun can't help smiling. Of course she can. He happily agrees and invites everyone to enjoy the party together. Around him, Kwon celebrates by dancing excitedly, Bat flutters happily through the air, and Theo relaxes comfortably on Sejun's shoulder as the cheerful atmosphere quickly returns. With the danger over, Sejun looks back down at the strange pineapple in his hands. He and Theo both lean in curiously, trying to figure out what kind of ridiculous fruit they just harvested. A system window finally provides the answer. The fruit is called a screaming pineapple, and its special trait is that it releases an explosive, man-infused scream the moment it's harvested. Sejun can only stare at the description in disbelief. As if that wasn't ridiculous enough, even more system windows begin appearing one after another. The notifications announce that Sejun has successfully created an entirely new crop species, rewarding him with exclusive cultivation rights along with additional job experience. After reading everything, Sejun simply closes his eyes and lets out a long, exhausted sigh. At this point, he complains that he can't even harvest fruit peacefully anymore without something unbelievable happening. Seeing him so worn out, Theo immediately perks up and tells him not to worry because everyone is there to help him. Bat eagerly agrees, fluttering beside them, while Iona sweetly promises that she'll help too whenever he needs it. Not wanting to be left out, Kwon throws both paws into the air with a huge grin and proudly declares that he'll help as well. Hearing all of them speak up one after another, Sejun's tired expression gradually softens. A warm smile spreads across his face as he realizes he's no longer handling everything alone. Feeling much lighter, Sejun continues walking through the fields with a pineapple in each hand. Theo comfortably rides on his shoulders while Kwon happily follows beside him. As they stroll along, Sejun asks Bat if he's ever tasted a pineapple before. Bat excitedly admits that he hasn't, but he's been looking forward to trying one. Meanwhile, walking alongside the group, Iona quietly continues thinking about only one thing: peanuts. The story suddenly shifts away from Sejun's peaceful farm to a completely different setting. Under a dark, cloud-covered night sky, the scene moves to the United States, where towering skyscrapers overlook a brightly lit city. Inside one of those luxury high-rise offices, an elderly businessman stands silently in front of a massive window, gazing out over the city below. A knock breaks the silence. Without even turning around, the old man simply tells the visitor to come in. A man in a gray suit enters the office and respectfully greets him as chairman. The old man gives only a brief, dismissive response before waiting for the report. The visitor gets straight to business. He's there to update the chairman on the tower farm project, and from the sound of it, he thinks everything is going perfectly. With a confident smile, he explains that they've already cleared all of the skeleton graveyards on the tower's second floor and turned them into efficient EXP farming zones. Now they're expanding the operation onto the third floor as well. He proudly adds that the project is generating around 3,000 tower coins every single day, confidently declaring that everything is proceeding exactly as planned. Feeling pleased with himself, he even asks if father remembers when he said the tower farm project would become a huge success. But the room instantly turns ice cold. The chairman clicks his tongue once. That single sound is enough to wipe the smile right off the man's face. The elderly businessman slowly looks back over his shoulder with an icy glare. This is Gaggle Group Chairman William McLaren. Without the slightest hint of warmth, he bluntly reminds the man that he already told him never to call him father. The man immediately realizes his mistake. He lowers his head in panic and hurriedly apologizes, but Chairman McLaren isn't interested in apologies. Instead, he asks a much more important question. Is everything really going as well as he claims? Before the man can answer, the chairman suddenly slams his fist onto the desk with enough force to shake the room. His patience is gone. He furiously demands to know whether the man is actually satisfied with earning only 3,000 tower coins a day after the company poured an enormous amount of money into the project. The man freezes. Unable to respond, he can only stand there while Chairman McLaren continues tearing into him. The chairman accuses him of becoming so obsessed with his tiny corner of the tower that he's completely lost sight of what's happening in the real world. Then he explains the real problem. The Hunter Association has already evaluated the rapidly worsening locust crisis spreading across Africa. Because of that, the company's secretly negotiated pest eradication support project with several African nations is now on the verge of collapsing. In other words, compared to that massive international opportunity, the Tower Farm project is almost insignificant. The man stands there completely speechless, his face turning pale as the weight of the criticism sinks in. Chairman McLaren coldly tells him he doesn't care whether that little farming project succeeds or fails anymore. Then he points directly at the office door. With a voice full of anger, he orders the man to get out. The man can only bow his head and retreat. His body trembles as he backs into the hallway, and the heavy wooden doors slam shut behind him. Standing alone in the dim corridor, he slowly turns his head and shoots a bitter glare toward the office. From behind the closed doors, he can still hear the chairman dismissing him as nothing but a useless piece of trash. His fist clenches so tightly that it begins to shake. Humiliation quickly transforms into resentment. His expression hardens into a cold scowl as he silently makes up his mind. If that's how things are going to be, then he'll handle everything his own way. Back on the farm, the party preparations keep rolling, and Sejun is clearly having the time of his life. Clapping his hands with a bright smile, he praises everyone's hard work as one of the rabbits proudly holds up a perfectly shaped piece of white rice dough, excitedly showing that they finally figured out how to make it properly. Sejun kneels beside the group to check their progress, and Theo tilts his head curiously, asking what they're making. Thinking for a moment, Sejun explains that it's called songpyeon, a traditional rice cake people normally eat during Chuseok back in the outside world. Chuseok is still a long way off, but that doesn't mean they need to wait for a holiday to enjoy good food together. He starts giving everyone a quick lesson, rolling a small piece of rice dough into a smooth ball before gently pressing the center to create the familiar half-moon shape. Around him, Kwon, Bat, Garen, Theo, and the rabbits eagerly copy every step, each trying their best to make their own. As everyone gets the hang of it, Sejun explains that the classic fillings are usually sesame seeds or sweet beans, but there's no reason they can't get creative. The rabbits proudly announce they're stuffing theirs with honey-coated sweet potatoes and mashed carrots. Theo, naturally, squeezes a generous helping of churro into his dough, while Iona shyly asks if she can fill hers with peanuts instead. Sejun immediately loves the idea and happily asks her to make a few peanut-filled ones for him too. Iona cheerfully agrees and begins carefully rolling tiny little songpyeon between her paws. Sejun laughs to himself a moment later when he realizes they're so adorably small that a single one wouldn't even count as a bite for a human. Then the peaceful cooking session instantly goes off the rails. Sejun turns around, and nearly has a heart attack. Kwon is proudly laying an entire fish onto an enormous sheet of dough as if that's the most normal thing in the world. Before Sejun can even process that disaster, he notices something even worse. Two rabbits are happily wrapping Garen inside a giant piece of dough while the little blue frog excitedly announces that he's becoming a songpyeon himself. Sejun immediately rushes over in complete panic, yanking Garen back out before he actually gets steamed with dinner. Watching everything unfold through the communication orb, Aileen can't stop laughing at the ridiculous chaos. Once Garen is safely rescued, Sejun notices a system message saying that the tower manager would like to try some songpyeon too. Smiling, he happily agrees to save some for Aileen as well. Setting Garen back down, Sejun looks around at the bustling farm. What started as a simple welcome home party has somehow grown into something much warmer. Everywhere he looks, everyone is busy together. Kwon, Theo, Iona, the mushroom ants, and the rabbits are all making songpyeon while others gather fresh strawberries, and for a moment it genuinely feels less like a celebration and more like spending a holiday with family. That thought brings a bittersweet smile to his face. He quietly wishes White Rabbit, Black Rabbit, and the Wolf Tribe children could have been there too. But instead of dwelling on it, he quickly cheers himself up, realizing they can always throw another party when everyone meets again. With renewed energy, Sejun calls everyone over to show off their creations. A rabbit proudly presents a large wooden tray overflowing with handmade songpyeon in all kinds of creative shapes. Seeing the finished results, Sejun can't help smiling. Every single one looks unique, cute, and full of personality. Picking up one shaped like a cat paw, he praises everyone for doing such an amazing job. Theo immediately puffs out his chest and proudly declares that, Of course, anything made with his golden paws would turn out perfect. Satisfied with everyone's work, Sejun announces that it's finally time to steam them. The entire group erupts in excited cheers as Queen Bee buzzes happily overhead, Bat flutters around, Garen hops excitedly, and even the mushroom ants celebrate. Sejun carefully places the large steamer over the roaring fire, and before long Kwon comes bouncing over, already impatient to eat. Grinning, Sejun tells him he has another important job while the Songpyeon cooks. His next mission? Making gari tteok. Sejun sets up a massive mortar filled with rice dough and explains that the more it's pounded, the chewier and better it becomes. Kwon peers inside and asks if he should really hit it as hard as he can. Sejun confidently tells him yes. That turns out to be a terrible choice of words. Kwon's eyes light up as he suddenly grows into his gigantic form. Gripping the huge wooden mallet like he's about to fight a final boss, he proudly declares that he's going to pound it with absolutely everything he has. Sejun's confidence evaporates instantly. The little bear leaps high into the sky, raising the enormous mallet overhead while spinning like a living tornado. The pressure alone sends powerful shockwaves across the field, and Sejun suddenly realizes Kwon isn't about to make rice cakes. He's about to accidentally demolish the entire floor. Frantically waving both arms, Sejun screams at him to stop before the whole place collapses. But just as Kwon brings the hammer down, a small black figure suddenly rockets into the sky. Black Rabbit appears out of nowhere, swinging his own tiny hammer with perfect timing. The two hammers collide midair, unleashing a tremendous shockwave that ripples across the farm. Sejun can only stare in complete disbelief at the unbelievable clash overhead. Meanwhile, Kwon simply blinks in confusion, wondering what just interrupted his attack. As the winds settle, Black Rabbit gracefully descends toward the ground with his hammer resting casually on his shoulder, looking as calm and composed as ever. The moment Kwon recognizes him, his confusion disappears completely. His face lights up with pure excitement as he happily shouts, "Big brother!" Subscribe. Comment. Turning around, Sejun lights up with surprise as Black Rabbit has finally returned, and he happily welcomes him back. Kwon is still holding onto his wooden stick. When the commotion catches the attention of the rabbits, who immediately come running over. The moment Mama Rabbit sees her son, she calls out to him and rushes forward. She wraps Black Rabbit in a warm hug, clearly overwhelmed with relief, and asks how he's been, admitting that she had been worried about him. Black Rabbit looks a little embarrassed by all the attention, but it's obvious he's happy to be home. Theo takes a good look at him and proudly points out that Black Rabbit seems to have matured quite a bit. Black Rabbit scratches his head modestly, almost unsure whether to believe the compliment, and asks if Theo really thinks so. Sejun crouches down so he's at Black Rabbit's level and asks about everything happening on the 55th floor, especially White Rabbit and the Wolf Tribe. Black Rabbit explains that everyone is currently busy rebuilding the Red Ribbon Kingdom. Unfortunately, the job hasn't exactly been easy because greed left the kingdom in complete chaos before everything fell apart. Black Rabbit's shoulders drop as he admits how difficult the reconstruction has been, but Mama Rabbit gently places a paw on him and reminds him how proud she is of everything he's doing. Sejun can only sympathize, recognizing that Black Rabbit has clearly been through a lot. Then Black Rabbit reaches into his pouch and pulls out something small. He carefully hands Sejun a strange little rabbit-shaped statue, and the moment Sejun examines it, a system window appears. It's a guardian rabbit statue, originally created by dwarves for the royal family of the Red Ribbon Kingdom. Back when the great black dragon Terra was serving as the kingdom's guardian dragon, she enchanted the statue and gave it to the royal family as a special treasure. Its abilities are particularly ridiculous. It can directly insert items into or extract items from the kingdom's treasury, meaning Sejun has essentially been handed a remote connection to the 55th floor treasure vault. Sejun stares at the statue in disbelief. Something this valuable obviously isn't the kind of thing he can casually accept, so he asks Black Rabbit if he's really allowed to use it. Black Rabbit explains that Theo already found the key to the treasury, while White Rabbit is grateful to everyone on the 99th floor, so they've basically given Sejun permission to use the treasury whenever necessary. Sejun finally understands. So that's what happened. Naturally, he immediately wants to test the new toy. Holding the little statue up, Sejun asks if they should try using it right now. Kwon instantly gets excited and wonders what kind of treasure they're going to pull out, while Sejun decides to go big and asks the statue to extract the largest item in the treasury. The statue's eyes suddenly glow bright red. Then, boom! A huge burst of pink magical energy erupts right in front of everyone. Sejun, Kwon, Theo, Bat, and the rabbits all stare in shock as two large wolf-shaped silhouettes appear inside the glowing energy, seemingly arguing with each other about how to organize the treasury. As the pink light finally fades, two wolves are left standing there, one of them still holding a wooden crate. Sejun is completely stunned. And then the leader of the silver wolves notices him. His expression changes instantly as he recognizes Sejun, clearly wondering why on earth he's suddenly been pulled straight out of the treasury. Sejun looks down at the tiny statue in his palm, while Kwon tilts his head in confusion, equally unsure why the biggest item in the treasury turned out to be two very confused wolves. But there's no time to dwell on that because the party has another important job to finish. Back at the cooking area, Black Rabbit stands over the mortar and brings his hammer down hard onto the sticky rice dough. Thud! He pulls the hammer back up, stretching the glossy dough high into the air before it slowly drops back down. Sejun immediately starts clapping, impressed by the result. The dough is smooth, glossy, and exactly the kind of texture they're looking for. Looking at Black Rabbit's hammer, Sejun jokingly wonders if it might actually be more useful for making rice cakes than fighting. Black Rabbit responds by absolutely destroying that theory. He unleashes a furious barrage of hammer strikes, moving so quickly that his mallet becomes little more than a glowing blur. The mortar practically shakes under the relentless pounding. Sejun immediately takes back what he said. Yeah, Black Rabbit is definitely still a warrior. Once the dough has been pounded enough, Sejun gives Black Rabbit 2 thumbs up, signaling that they've got enough and that he can stop. Black Rabbit pauses with the hammer raised over his head, staring back at Sejun with a slightly confused expression. Sejun then lifts the warm, steaming mound of dough and excitedly announces that it's time to make gari-teok. Kwon practically explodes with excitement. Sejun sets up the wooden rice cake maker and carefully instructs Kwon to press the dough through it slowly and gently. Queen Bee hovers nearby while Theo and Black Rabbit watch closely, waiting to see if their hard work actually turns into proper rice cakes. Kwon carefully pushes down. And sure enough, a long, smooth strand of fresh gari-teok begins sliding out of the machine and into the basket below. Theo's eyes widen as he watches the rice cake coming out in one perfect piece. Sejun gives everyone an enthusiastic thumbs up, praising the group for their hard work and complimenting the tool for doing its job beautifully. One of the rabbits even celebrates with an energetic little beep, as everyone admires their handiwork. Then the system provides the official verdict. The finished product is slightly chewy gari-teok, made from top-quality rice dough and pressed under high pressure. Sejun is listed as the chef, while Black Rabbit is also credited as a warrior and clumsy rice cake artisan because of his contribution to pounding the dough. Sejun immediately finds that title hilarious. Black Rabbit, meanwhile, just scratches his head with an innocent, slightly embarrassed expression, apparently unsure why becoming a rice cake artisan is somehow a thing now. With the cooking finally complete, Sejun picks up a large wooden bowl and announces to everyone that it's time to eat. The entire group happily follows him like a little food parade, with Kwon, Theo, Black Rabbit, Queen Bee, Bat, and the rabbits all gathering around the feast. The main attraction is a huge pot of steaming mushroom hot pot, packed with colorful vegetables, mushrooms, and tender slices of meat floating in a rich broth. Theo sits comfortably on Sejun's shoulder and immediately notices that the soup looks even better than before. Sejun proudly confirms that they've upgraded the menu with a proper mushroom hot pot, then holds up one of the freshly harvested mushrooms. These aren't ordinary mushrooms anymore. Because the mushroom ants have been eating such nutritious food on Sejun's farm, the mushrooms growing on their backs have absorbed enough high-quality nutrients to reach their peak condition. The system has even classified one as an elixir, mushroom ant's mushroom, a rare delicacy that tastes and smells excellent and can permanently increase all stats by 1 when eaten. Sejun looks at the mushroom with a pleased smile, already imagining how much better the hot pot is going to taste with an ingredient like that. And judging by everyone's reaction, he's absolutely right. Kwon proudly holds up a long spiral of freshly made gari-teok and calls for everyone to eat together, officially kicking off the feast. The farm immediately turns into a food festival. Bat happily nibbles away, Black Rabbit checks out a plate overflowing with songpyeon, Garen munches on an enormous green onion like it's completely normal, and Papa Rabbit settles down comfortably with a steaming bowl of soup. Queen Bee shares fresh strawberries with one of the mushroom ants, while Iona sits peacefully on the grass, completely focused on eating her songpyeon. For a moment, everything is calm. Then a thunderous roar completely destroys the peace. Iona nearly jumps out of her fur and drops her food, immediately demanding to know who could possibly be shouting like that. The answer is, unfortunately, obvious. Killian is standing there holding a tiny piece of songpyeon and loudly demanding to know who made the sweet potato-filled ones. A terrified rabbit slowly raises its head. Killian's enormous gaze locks onto the little chef, and the rabbit probably thinks it's about to be eaten by a dragon. Instead, Killian's expression suddenly transforms. Splendid! The sweet potato songpyeon is apparently incredible. Killian loudly praises the flavor, calling the decision to fill rice cakes with sweet potatoes an absolute stroke of genius. The little rabbit practically sparkles with pride, clearly delighted that its cooking has received such a powerful endorsement. Unfortunately, Killian is still shouting every single word. Kaiser finally has enough and bonks him on the head, ordering him to stop yelling. The tiny rabbit just stands there silently, watching the whole thing unfold like it has absolutely no idea what is happening anymore. Meanwhile, Kwon spots his mother and happily runs over with a piece of food raised high, calling her over so they can eat together. His giant crimson mother joins the feast, making the already crowded gathering even more lively. Sejun finally gets a chance to sit down and enjoy the food himself. He lifts his wooden bowl and takes a long, satisfying drink of the hot broth. And it's fantastic. He finishes the entire bowl, leans back with a deeply satisfied expression, and lets out an appreciative sigh about how amazing it tastes. Theo is comfortably settled in his lap, happily nibbling on his own food, while Kwon dances nearby with his meal in hand. And beside them, Iona has apparently decided that the proper way to enjoy a feast is to shove as much songpyeon into her mouth as possible, leaving her looking even more ridiculously adorable while everyone around her continues enjoying the party. Sejun leans toward the glowing pink communication orb with a friendly smile, eager to hear what Aileen thinks of the feast. He asks how she's enjoying the chef's soup, especially after adding the highly nutritious mushrooms. Aileen cradles her warm bowl and immediately lights up. She tells Sejun that the songpyeon was already delicious, but this soup is something else entirely. The flavor is amazing, and more importantly, she can actually feel her mana filling up much faster than it does when she eats Sejun's other dishes. Sejun is genuinely happy that she likes it, but before he can say much more, a system notification appears announcing that the administrator of taste is highly satisfied. Apparently, Sejun's cooking has officially received another very important review. Then Kwon suddenly looks up in distress. The reason becomes obvious when his giant crimson mother holds up a tiny piece of food between her enormous claws. Kwon points out the obvious problem. The bite is simply way too small for his gigantic mother to eat properly. Sejun looks at her for a moment and realizes he's going to need a much bigger solution. So he turns toward one of the mushroom ants and asks for a single mushroom. The helpful little ant happily hands one over, and Sejun immediately activates his crop giantization skill. Blue magical energy swirls around the mushroom, and Sejun watches closely as the spell begins taking effect. Then a system notification appears, explaining that because the mushroom is actually an elixir, its enormous nutritional value significantly boosts the effect of crop giantization. Sejun's eyes widen. The mushroom doesn't just grow a little. It starts expanding at an absurd rate, rapidly becoming larger and larger until it towers above them like an enormous tree. Sejun stares straight up at it in disbelief. He knew the skill would make the mushroom bigger, but apparently nobody warned him it could turn a mushroom into a landmark. The Crimson Mama Bear, however, seems perfectly satisfied. She looks up at the gigantic mushroom, raises her claws, and happily thanks Sejun before swinging her massive paw through it. Slash! The enormous mushroom is sliced apart, and huge chunks immediately begin crashing toward the ground. Sejun and Theo freeze in horror as the pieces come tumbling down, while even the mama bear realizes she may have slightly underestimated the size of what she just cut. One enormous slice comes straight toward Sejun and Theo, but before it can flatten them, Garen suddenly leaps forward and shields them beneath his massive head. Sejun immediately recognizes their unexpected savior and calls out to Garen in relief, while Theo happily praises the blue frog for coming through at exactly the right moment. The mama bear sheepishly apologizes, explaining that she only meant to cut the giant mushroom into smaller, bite-sized pieces. Sejun quickly reassures her that it's fine and admits he was just caught off guard by the sheer size of the mushroom. And honestly, the danger turns out to have been worth it. Kwon immediately dives onto one of the freshly cut mushroom pieces and starts enjoying himself. Black Rabbit touches the surface and is surprised by how incredible it feels. Sejun looks over, confused, until he finally realizes what everyone is discovering. The giant mushroom isn't just edible. It's incredibly soft. Sejun laughs as he pats the surface, realizing the mushroom slices are practically giant cushions. In fact, they're so soft that they could easily be used as beds. So naturally, Sejun tests that theory himself. He lies down on the enormous mushroom slice, sinks comfortably into it, and immediately declares that he loves it. Kwon rolls around happily beside him while Garen enjoys the new mushroom bed too. It doesn't take long before the combination of a full stomach, a soft mushroom, and a peaceful farm completely defeats Sejun. His eyes slowly close as he admits that he's getting sleepy. And then he's already asleep. Kwon stares at him in disbelief, basically wondering how someone can fall asleep that quickly. Nearby, the Crimson Mama Bear is much more practical, happily munching away on her own giant mushroom slice. The scene becomes even more peaceful when Aileen watches through the magical orb. Sejun is fast asleep on his back with his straw hat resting on his chest, while Theo is curled comfortably on top of him and Iona is snuggled nearby. Aileen covers her mouth and quietly giggles at the adorable sight. For a moment, she's simply enjoying the peaceful scene. Then she suddenly stops. Her expression changes as something catches her attention. At the same time, Iona's ears perk up. The little hamster senses something strange in the air and quietly questions the unfamiliar energy. She turns toward the horizon, focusing on where the presence is coming from. Then she realizes it. It's coming from the south. Far away from the peaceful farm, something much darker is already moving. The ground begins to tremble as enormous crimson mandibles tear through the soil, and from beneath the forest floor, a terrifying swarm of ants begins emerging. Thousands upon thousands of them pour out and advance together, their presence completely changing the atmosphere. Iona stares toward the approaching threat, her expression becoming serious as she realizes that whatever is coming, it's heading straight toward them.
Like, share.
A massive swarm of fire ants suddenly pours out of the southern forest, charging towards Sejun's farm like a living crimson tide. There are so many of them that it looks like the entire forest floor is moving. Then, just as the ants are about to reach the farm, the leading ant abruptly stops, as if it senses something terrifying overhead. High above the trees, Kaiser silently spreads his enormous black wings, casting a shadow over the entire swarm. He doesn't panic, and he doesn't even bother asking questions first. He simply raises a single claw and gathers an incredibly dense point of magical energy at its tip. With complete confidence, Kaiser quietly mutters a single command, vanish. The next instant, a blinding blue beam erupts from his claw and washes over the battlefield. The ants don't even have time to react. The overwhelming blast completely engulfs the entire horde in one attack. When the light finally fades, the forest is eerily quiet. The countless fire ants are simply gone. Nothing remains except a few faint blue wisps drifting through the air. Kaiser stares down at the empty ground for a moment before tilting his head in genuine confusion, almost as if he forgot what he had just erased. He casually wonders what those strange bugs even were. Perched comfortably on his shoulder, Iona immediately explains that they were fire ants coming from the southern forest. Since Sejun's party had prepared so much delicious food, the rich aroma must have spread far enough to attract the swarm. Hearing that, Kaiser quietly considers the situation. If ants can wander in so easily, maybe the southern forest itself needs to be dealt with. Before he can decide anything, Iona confidently tells him to leave it to her because she already has an idea. Curious, Kaiser lowers his head toward the tiny hamster and asks if she wants to explain it. Iona simply smiles. Kaiser nods in approval, deciding her plan sounds good enough. Meanwhile, while powerful beings casually discuss defending the farm, Sejun remains completely unaware of everything. He's still fast asleep on the giant mushroom bed with his straw hat resting on his chest, while Black Rabbit sleeps beside him and Theo has somehow rolled over until he's comfortably sprawled across Sejun's legs. Theo stretches in his sleep with a satisfied little murmur, looking far too comfortable to wake up anytime soon. Seeing everyone sleeping so peacefully, Iona can't help smiling. She pops up beside Theo with a cheerful laugh before deciding she's earned a nap too. Since she'd already finished talking with Lord Black Dragon, there wasn't anything urgent left to do. She snuggles herself right against Theo's incredibly fluffy belly, thinking that his fur really is the perfect place to sleep. Before she can even finish the thought, her eyes slowly close. Within moments, she's sound asleep. But the moment Iona falls asleep, her surroundings suddenly change. Instead of Theo's warm fur, she finds herself floating inside an endless black void. She looks around in confusion. Then desperate voices echo through the darkness. Iona! Several familiar figures emerge from the shadows, desperately reaching toward her while shouting for help. Among them are Vice Tower Master Ganoba and the other Tower Masters, all trapped inside the nightmare. Some beg her to save them. Ganoba, however, glares at her with frustration, accusing her of causing all of this in the first place. Rather than getting angry, Iona simply looks at them with calm sympathy. She gently explains that unfortunately she can't pull anyone out of their nightmares. Just like no one could dream on her behalf, no one can escape this place for someone else. A nightmare is something each person has to overcome on their own. She admits that when she first accepted nightmare herself, every single day was unbearable. But eventually she realized something important. As shadowy monsters slowly begin surrounding her, Iona calmly explains that there is only one way to leave this place. You have to become stronger. She points out that the ancient demon king won't even allow death inside this nightmare because endless suffering is more entertaining to him. As cruel as that sounds, it also creates a strange opportunity. Since no one can truly die here, they can fight forever. They can train forever. They can continue growing stronger without limit. As dark hands reach toward her from every direction, flames burst to life around Iona. With effortless confidence, she unleashes a wave of destructive magic that instantly sweeps away every shadow creature closing in around her. Watching the monsters disappear, she explains that realizing this truth is exactly how she became the strongest mage in the Black Tower and earned the title Mage of Destruction. Then she looks directly at Ganoba. She remembers that he once said he wanted to become the president of the Mages Association. So she gives him a challenge. If he truly wants that position, then surpass her. Become stronger than the Mage of Destruction herself. If he can actually accomplish that, she'll gladly hand the position over. The scene then quietly shifts back to reality. Theo slowly wakes up from his nap, stretching lazily before suddenly frowning. Something feels unusually heavy. Still half asleep, he mutters that it almost feels like someone's crushing him. Looking down, he finally notices the culprit. Iona is sleeping peacefully on top of his fluffy belly. Smiling helplessly, Theo carefully picks her up without waking her and gently places her on top of Sejun's stomach instead. The extra weight immediately makes Sejun groan in his sleep, but he's far too exhausted to wake up. Around them, Kwon, Black Rabbit, and Garen are all still sleeping peacefully as well. Theo looks around at everyone and can't help wondering if today somehow became official nap time. Then he quickly shakes that thought away. Puffing out his chest proudly, Theo reminds himself that the greatest wandering merchant can't spend all day sleeping. With renewed determination, he declares that it's time for him to get back to work. A short while later, the scene shifts to the wandering merchant headquarters on the Black Tower's 75th floor, where Theo confidently marches up to the grand reception desk. A polite gazelle clerk greets him with a warm smile and asks how she can help. Planting his paws proudly on his hips, Theo wastes no time announcing that he's there to receive his promotion to top-tier wandering merchant. The clerk nods politely before asking if he's already met all the promotion requirements. Theo grins with complete confidence. According to what he knows, all he needs is more than 3 million tower coins in total sales, and he proudly boasts that he cleared that requirement a long time ago. The clerk, however, suddenly looks a little awkward. She hesitates before asking if Theo has heard about the recent incident involving the landlord greed on the 55th floor. Theo immediately misunderstands where the conversation is going. He smugly scratches the back of his head and assumes she's recognizing him as the hero who helped capture greed. With a proud smile, he practically introduces himself as the famous golden cat who played a huge role in taking greed down. The clerk quickly interrupts before he gets carried away. She explains that because of that incident, the Merchant Association recently revised the promotion regulations. As soon as Theo hears that, his confident pose completely freezes. The clerk calmly informs him that becoming a top-tier wandering merchant is much harder now, and from this point onward every applicant must satisfy all of the following requirements. Possess at least 5 million tower coins in capital. Employ 5 or more subordinates. Secure 3 or more exclusive products. Handle at least 10 different kinds of products. Have experience climbing above the 90th floor of the tower. She apologetically explains that the standards became much stricter because these new rules came directly from Association President Mason himself. Instead of looking discouraged, Theo simply glances over the list and casually shrugs. To him, none of it sounds difficult. The clerk blinks in surprise. Without another word, Theo drops an enormous money bag onto the floor with a loud thud. He calmly announces that this is the first 1 million tower coins. The heavy impact immediately attracts attention throughout the headquarters. A rhino official rushes over in alarm, wondering what's happening at the reception desk. Before anyone can even react, Theo continues unloading more bags. Soon, 5 enormous bags filled with tower coins are piled behind him. Looking at the stunned staff, Theo casually asks if 5 million tower coins should be enough. Both the gazelle clerk and the rhino official are left speechless. After hearing that Theo is applying for promotion, the rhino official suddenly realizes exactly who he's dealing with. In complete disbelief, he blurts out, "You're Sir Theo?" He immediately recognizes Theo as the wandering merchant who personally rescued Association President Mason's son, ARA'S. Theo cheerfully confirms it like it's no big deal. The rhino official instantly bows deeply over the counter in panic, apologizing that Theo should have been promoted immediately without making him go through all this paperwork. Theo simply waves it off. Rules are rules. He doesn't want special treatment. Instead, he'll prove fairly that he deserves the promotion like everyone else. Watching Theo insist on following the regulations despite his reputation leaves both employees deeply impressed. The rhino official can't help thinking that this is exactly what true dignity looks like, while the gazelle clerk quietly whispers to herself that Theo looks unbelievably cool. Meanwhile, Theo secretly smirks to himself. In his mind, he's already celebrating because after these ridiculous new requirements, there probably won't be another top-tier wandering merchant for a very long time. Since everyone is following the rules, Theo immediately starts proving each condition one by one. First, he hands over all the paperwork verifying the 5 million tower coins and also presents the contracts for his interns, satisfying the employment requirement. While the two officials carefully begin checking the documents, Theo moves on to the remaining conditions. Next come the requirements for 3 exclusive products and 10 different product types. Theo starts unloading basket after basket until the reception area is practically overflowing with fresh crops. There are chili peppers, potatoes, sweet potatoes, strawberries, tomatoes, corn, carrots, and several kinds of fresh green vegetables. With a proud grin, Theo explains that every single crop he sells is exclusive. Nobody else anywhere in the tower can obtain them. The mountain of rare produce leaves both officials staring in complete disbelief. They can't understand where someone could possibly obtain so many exclusive crops. Theo only giggles. If he reveals where they came from, then he'd automatically satisfy the final requirement too. Pointing proudly upward, Theo reveals that every one of those crops was grown on the 99th floor of the tower. That instantly proves he has experience climbing well beyond the required 90th floor. At that point, there isn't a single requirement left unchecked. Realizing Theo has officially qualified, the Rhino official immediately orders the clerk to prepare the promotion. Using a special magical process, the Gazelle clerk enchants a shining golden coin, engraving Theo's name onto the back. The Rhino official then proudly presents it. This golden coin is the official badge of a top-tier wandering merchant. As the badge is pinned onto his green cloak, Theo's face lights up with overwhelming joy. He can't stop smiling. His eyes slowly begin filling with tears. For a long moment, he simply clutches the badge against his chest. Finally, after everything he'd gone through, he had achieved his dream. Old memories flood back into his mind. He remembers failing in love simply because he was poor. He remembers being tricked and scammed during his wandering merchant days. Back then, becoming a top-tier merchant felt impossibly far away. But now, he'd finally made it. Then Theo remembers the moment everything changed. He recalls meeting Sejun inside the cave and hearing the simple question that completely transformed his life. "Would you like to work with me?" Thinking back on that moment, Theo smiles warmly. None of this would have been possible without Chairman Park. The Rhino official warmly congratulates him once again. After thanking him, Theo suddenly remembers that top-tier wandering merchants are supposed to receive special privileges. The official happily confirms that's true, explaining that the Merchant Association offers all kinds of exclusive benefits to merchants who reach this rank. The Gazelle clerk asks if there's a particular privilege Theo wants to use first. Theo slowly turns away from the counter. With his brand new golden badge shining proudly on his chest, he confidently walks forward before making his very first request as a top-tier wandering merchant. He wants access to land deeds from other floors of the tower. In other words, Theo's next goal is to start trading land deeds. Subscribe. Comment. Theo's eyes go wide in complete shock as he demands to know what they're talking about. The Rhinoceros official and the Gazelle clerk calmly explain that land deed transactions have been temporarily suspended. Theo immediately becomes confused and demands to know why, and the Gazelle nervously explains that things have gotten dangerous lately because robbers have been murdering land deed owners and stealing their properties. Because of that, the association has temporarily stopped all land deed transactions to keep its members safe. Theo clenches his little paws, clearly unwilling to let the matter end there, and asks if there's really no other way for him to obtain a land deed. The Rhino pauses to think it over, and then the Gazelle suddenly realizes there might actually be another option. She suggests checking the association's lost and found storage, wondering if there might be something useful stored there. The Rhino considers the idea and agrees that it's definitely worth checking. Theo tilts his head in confusion, asking what exactly they mean by lost and found storage, and that's when a heavy, ominous sound comes from the doorway. Standing there is a heavily armored lizard guard with a sharp, toothy grin. He's carrying both a sword and shield, and his intimidating appearance makes it immediately clear that this isn't some ordinary storage room anyone can casually walk into. Theo and the Rhino head outside into the courtyard, where the lizard guard stands in front of the massive double doors. The guard watches them carefully with narrowed eyes as the Rhino approaches him. Theo proudly introduces himself as the newly promoted Golden Cat, Theo, while the lizard silently takes in the situation. He recognizes the Rhino official, Teru, and notices that Theo is a top-tier wandering merchant he hasn't seen before. Teru then tells the guard that they're here to access the storage room and hands him the key. The lizard accepts it and says he'll open the room immediately. Before they enter, Teru casually remarks that it's actually been a very long time since he's been inside the place himself. The lizard unlocks the enormous doors, and they slowly creak open with loud metallic clanks. Once the entrance is clear, he gestures toward the darkness and politely tells them to go ahead. Theo looks into the storage room with bright, shining eyes. Inside is a massive, gloomy chamber with stone walls, dusty shelves, cobwebs, old barrels, forgotten objects, and all kinds of relics scattered throughout the place. It looks less like a normal storage room and more like a forgotten treasure vault that hasn't been properly searched in years. Teru looks around and comments that the place is extremely old and dreary. There is so much junk packed inside that he isn't even sure Theo will be able to find whatever he's looking for. Still, he suggests that if Theo searches carefully, he might find something useful. But before Teru can finish, he notices something strange. Theo's golden front paws have started glowing. Theo notices it too, and his face immediately lights up with excitement as the golden energy around his paws becomes even stronger. Theo realizes that his paws are reacting like crazy. And from that point on, the search becomes completely different. Theo starts darting around the storage room, checking one item after another. He finds an ornate golden necklace and holds it up with a delighted grin, deciding that it looks pretty good. Then he discovers 2 potion flasks, immediately recognizing that they're extraordinary as well. Before long, Theo is zipping around the entire storage room in a chaotic frenzy, grabbing interesting objects and throwing them into the air as he searches through everything. A tool goes flying, followed by a strange star-shaped projectile, while Theo happily declares that this place is absolute heaven. Teru can only stand there watching him with a nervous sweat drop. Eventually, Theo finds a small box and climbs inside it, sitting comfortably with his tail wagging as if he's already made himself at home. Teru approaches him and nervously calls his name, trying to get his attention. That's when Teru reminds Theo of an important rule. According to the association's regulations, Theo is only allowed to take one item from the lost and found storage. Theo sits there comfortably in the box, looking completely unbothered. Then he raises his paw and confidently says, 5. Teru freezes in confusion. Theo holds his paw directly in front of the stunned official and cheerfully repeats his demand, basically telling him to give him 5 items. Teru immediately panics, explaining that this is a problem because the items are strictly managed by the association and have to go through a rigorous procedure before they're allowed to leave the storage. Theo thinks about it for approximately half a second before lowering his demand. Then 4. Teru is already sweating heavily. He explains that the regulations really don't allow that many, but after struggling with the situation, he finally says he can make a special exception and let Theo take 2 items. Theo closes his eyes and starts thinking. He remembers what President Mason told him earlier. Since Theo had saved Mason's son, ARA'S, the president had expressed his gratitude and told Theo that he could ask for anything he wanted. Theo realizes he can use that. He casually remarks that perhaps he'll just have to speak with President Mason directly. The effect on Teru is immediate. The rhino official looks completely horrified, his eyes going wide against the darkened background as he realizes that Theo might actually go straight to the association president. He desperately tries to stop things from escalating and begs Theo to settle for 3 items instead. Theo tilts his head and repeats the number. 3? Then, covering his mouth with a sly little smile, Theo chuckles and finally agrees. He'll settle for 3. Teru is left scratching his head nervously, while Theo cheerfully skips away from the negotiation, completely satisfied with himself. As he walks through the storage room, Theo proudly thinks that now that he's a top-tier wandering merchant, haggling 3 times must simply be standard practice for someone of his level. Sure, 3 items are a little disappointing compared to the 5 he originally demanded, but there are still plenty of treasures scattered around this enormous storage room, so Theo is confident he'll find something amazing. Then his thoughts turn toward the person who matters most. With a bright, starry expression, Theo starts wondering what kind of treasure would make Chairman Park Sejun happy. Back on the 99th floor, Sejun is completely caught off guard when Iona suddenly brings up an unexpected idea. He stares at her in disbelief, basically asking, "Wait, what?" while Iona happily explains that she wants to build a magic tower right here on the 99th floor. Sejun leans forward with wide eyes, wondering if something like that is even possible, but Iona assures him that the Black Dragon has already given them permission. More importantly, she explains that having a magic tower on the 99th floor would actually be useful for farming as well, so it wouldn't just be a place for mages to practice. Iona then points out the southern forest, explaining that this is where they plan to build it. The area is still dangerous because of the fire ants that recently swarmed towards Sejun's farm, so if they clear out the fire ants while constructing the tower, the entire southern region will become much safer. Sejun crouches down in front of Iona with an excited grin, clearly liking the idea, and Iona happily asks whether he'll allow her to build the magic tower there. Sejun immediately gives her a warm smile and a thumbs up, telling her that it's fine and that she should let him know if there's anything he can do to help. Then, because Sejun is Sejun, he follows that serious conversation by offering Iona a massive handful of peanuts. Iona's eyes practically light up, and she happily accepts as Sejun piles up a huge amount of peanuts in front of her. She sits beside the mountain of snacks and happily munches away, thanking Sejun for the treat, while Sejun watches her with a warm smile. But before they can continue, someone calls out to Sejun. It's Black Rabbit, who has returned with 2 wolves, and he's carrying a large red bag on his back. Black Rabbit explains that they're heading back to the 55th floor because they need to help White Rabbit with the rebuilding effort. Turning around with a cheerful smile, Black Rabbit thanks Sejun for giving them so many carrot seeds. He promises that they'll take good care of the carrot farm on the 55th floor as well. Sejun crouches down in his straw hat and waves goodbye, telling Black Rabbit to have a safe trip and asking him to give White Rabbit his regards. Meanwhile, Iona is still sitting comfortably in the background, happily eating her peanuts like she has completely moved into snack paradise. Just as the group is preparing to leave, the Silver Wolf tribe chief steps closer to Sejun. The wolf looks down at him with bright amber eyes and a friendly expression before simply calling his name, Sejun. Sejun turns around curiously, wondering what he wants, and the wolf holds out his large paw, telling Sejun that he has something for him. Resting in the middle of the wolf's paw is a single brown seed with a textured shell. The wolf explains that he discovered it while organizing the treasure vault. Since the seed gives off a distinctly nutty smell, he believes it might be some kind of plant seed, so he thought Sejun would be the best person to identify it. Sejun carefully picks up the little seed and immediately recognizes it. He asks if it's a walnut, and right on cue, a system window appears confirming that it is indeed a grade C training walnut. The system explains that this walnut came from a tree growing inside the tower, and it has a rather unusual effect. If someone personally cracks the walnut shell, their strength increases by 0.1, and eating it also helps them stay full for longer. The wolf is impressed that Sejun recognized it immediately and chuckles, saying that he expected Sejun would know exactly what it was. Sejun, however, focuses on the strange effect. He's intrigued that the strength increase comes from cracking the shell yourself, rather than from actually eating the walnut. Holding the walnut carefully in one hand while cradling Iona in the other, Sejun thanks the wolf and promises that he'll plant the walnut carefully and raise it properly. Soon, Sejun stands farther down the path, waving goodbye as Iona sits comfortably in his hand. The two wolves begin walking away, with Black Rabbit happily riding on the back of the front wolf. Once they're gone, Sejun looks down at the walnut and starts thinking that maybe it's time to plant something new for a change. Iona, still sitting on his hand, happily agrees that she should get started on the construction work for the magic tower as well. The scene then returns to Sejun's farm, stretching peacefully beneath a bright blue sky with his small rustic house in the background. Sejun walks casually between the rows of crops, looking around as he considers where to plant the walnut. He eventually spots something unusual near the tomato crops, next to a stone tablet. A small plant has grown there. Sejun stares at it from behind, confused, wondering if he planted something there before and trying to figure out what exactly he's looking at. Then it clicks. He crouches down excitedly and realizes that this is the 5-colored bean plant he planted a while ago. Even better, the plant has already grown pods and produced fruit. Sejun carefully snaps open one of the fresh green pods, revealing a row of colorful beans inside. Almost immediately, several system notifications appear one after another. Sejun has acquired 4 5-colored beans, followed by 1 stamina-boosting red bean. His harvesting skill proficiency increases slightly, and he also receives 700 EXP. Sejun picks up the shiny red bean and examines it curiously. He realizes that the 5-colored bean plant doesn't just produce the original 5-colored beans, it can apparently produce other specialized varieties as well. The system then reveals the details of the grade C stamina-boosting red bean. When eaten, it increases Sejun's stamina stat by 100% for 1 minute, but unlike ordinary beans, this special bean won't sprout roots if planted. That makes Sejun wonder whether the plant might also produce beans of other colors with different effects. And sure enough, he soon gets his answer. Crouching among the corn crops, Sejun finds another colorful bean and excitedly realizes that there really are different varieties. The system identifies it as a grade C strength-boosting yellow bean. This bean increases the user's strength stat by 100% for 1 minute when consumed, and just like the red bean, it can't be planted to grow another plant. The system also identifies Sejun as the tower farmer who cultivated it and gives it an expiration date of 90 days. Sejun connects the effects immediately. The red bean boosts stamina, while the yellow bean boosts strength. Naturally, there's only one thing left to do. Sejun tosses one of the beans into the air and wonders whether he should actually try eating it. He pops the bean into his mouth. The moment he bites down, his face twists from the strange, sour taste, his expression practically screaming regret. But then, a massive burst of energy explodes around him. Flames surge outward as Sejun clenches his fists and lets out a fierce roar. He can suddenly feel an incredible amount of strength flooding through his body. Sejun looks down at his arms, which have become noticeably more muscular, and proudly realizes just how powerful the boost is. In fact, he thinks that with this much strength, he might finally be able to withstand one of Kwang's hugs. Which is honestly a pretty serious benchmark on the 99th floor. With his newfound confidence, Sejun holds up a handful of beans along with the walnut and declares that he's going to use this momentum to finish all his farming in just 1 minute. Meanwhile, somewhere else, Theo has apparently been busy with his own mission. He stands with his arms crossed, eyes closed, letting out a relieved sigh as he thinks that he's finally done. Beside him stands Taru, the well-dressed rhino official wearing glasses and a suit. Magical scrolls and a pickaxe are laid out nearby, and Theo confidently announces that he's made his decision. Taru looks genuinely surprised, especially because he didn't expect Theo to actually find something as valuable as a land deed. Theo proudly glows with magical energy and explains that this is simply the power of his golden front paws. Among the 3 items is a sturdy pickaxe with a gleaming metal head. Theo admits that he doesn't really know what this strange stick is supposed to be used for, but his golden front paws reacted to it more strongly than anything else. Then Theo remembers Kwang. Since Kwang likes sticks so much, Theo decides that the pickaxe will make a great present for him. Taru laughs warmly and tells Theo not to worry about it. He congratulates him once again on becoming a top-tier wandering merchant, and Theo happily thanks him. Theo then starts walking away through the massive open gateway, but before leaving, he turns around and tells Taru that he's a good guy. If Taru ever visits the 99th floor, Theo promises to treat him well. Taru laughs awkwardly, admitting that the 99th floor sounds a little scary. A heavy stone door begins closing behind them with a deep thudding sound, but Theo turns back one more time with an enthusiastic bounce and reassures him that there's nothing to be afraid of. According to Theo, the 99th floor is actually much more peaceful than people think, and, most importantly, there's plenty of delicious food. The stone door continues closing, leaving Teru behind. But in the dim shadows nearby, the reptilian guard narrows his yellow eyes and gives a cunning, intrigued grin. Hearing Theo talk about the supposedly peaceful 99th floor and all that delicious food, the guard quietly lets out an interested, "Oh ho."
Like, share.
Back in the magic tower of gravity, Iona is greeted by the mages the moment she returns. The dog and duck mages look up in surprise before happily calling out to Lady Iona, while Iona walks into the chamber with her usual cheerful energy, greeting everyone as if she had only been away for a short while. The others are clearly relieved to see her alive. One mage happily says they knew she would make it back safely because there was no way someone as powerful as Iona could be defeated so easily. Another points toward the dark crystal orb sitting on the ritual platform and explains that the sealing stone is still completely intact. If Iona had actually been defeated, the ancient demon king would have been able to possess that crystal orb again, so the fact that the seal remains untouched confirms that she succeeded. But the relief quickly turns into anger when they start discussing what happened. The dog mage angrily condemns Genoba for plotting such a disgusting scheme, while another mage clenches his fist as he realizes just how serious the situation was. Tower masters from other towers were involved too, which means they had seriously underestimated how dangerous the Magic Council had become. Iona, meanwhile, is casually munching on a peanut through all of this. But then she says she has something important to tell everyone from the Magic Tower of Gravity. The mages immediately become attentive, and the goat and lizard mages assure her that whatever she wants, they'll follow her without hesitation. Iona smiles brightly, clasps her paws together, and reveals her plan. She wants everyone to come with her to the 99th floor and help build a brand new magic tower there. That announcement completely kills the cheerful atmosphere. Everyone freezes in shock. The 99th floor? The very top of the tower? The mages immediately start panicking. They remind each other of all the terrifying rumors surrounding the upper floors, especially the idea that the monsters become stronger the higher you climb. They've even heard that monsters from the 99th floor recently invaded the 77th floor and completely destroyed it. Then comes an even worse rumor: the gorilla tribe was apparently wiped out during that incident. Now the mages are sweating bullets, and honestly, after hearing that, their fear makes a lot more sense. Iona, however, doesn't look worried at all. She simply gives them a sweet, confident smile and assures everyone that she will personally guarantee their safety. But then her expression changes. The cheerful smile disappears, a dark aura gathers around her, and suddenly the mages realize this isn't really a discussion anymore. Iona calmly makes it clear that going to the 99th floor isn't a request. It's an order. The lizard and goat mages immediately break into nervous sweats, while Iona happily bounces around and tells everyone to start preparing because they're leaving right now. And, of course, she continues casually munching on her peanut like she didn't just order an entire group of terrified mages to move to the most dangerous floor in the tower. After finishing the last bit of work, Sejun brushes the dirt from his hands and lets out a satisfied sigh. The planting is finally done, and as he looks over the freshly prepared fields, he realizes just how many new crops he has added to the farm this time. There are the walnuts and 5-colored beans, along with the mango and watermelon seeds he brought back from the 77th floor, and on top of those, he has also planted the radish, Napa cabbage, and cucumber seeds he recently purchased from the seed shop. With rows of freshly tilled farmland stretching out in front of him, Sejun proudly spreads his arms and announces that everything is finally planted. Quang, Bat, the rabbits, the mushroom ants, and both queen bees are all gathered around him, having helped with the work, so Sejun gives everyone a warm smile and thanks them for their hard work. Papa Rabbit happily raises his paw with a little squeak, while the mushroom ants proudly explain that after eating so much delicious food at the party, they have more than enough energy to work, and now they want to earn their keep. Seeing everyone so energetic, Sejun laughs and decides they deserve a reward. He asks if everyone wants a snack, and right on cue, Mama Rabbit and another rabbit come rushing over with large covered baskets balanced on their heads. Sejun smiles at their timing as Mama Rabbit pulls away the blue cloth covering one of the baskets, revealing a steaming batch of freshly made honey algae. Sejun's eyes light up at the sight, immediately impressed by how well the rice cakes turned out. Another rabbit also arrives carrying freshly harvested strawberries, explaining that they brought them just like Sejun had asked, and Sejun happily praises them for doing a good job. Then he gets an idea. The honey algae already looks delicious, but adding fresh strawberries on top should make it even better. Kwang and Garen eagerly stare at their portions as Sejun explains that the sweet and juicy strawberries should pair perfectly with the soft rice cake. The moment Kwang and Garen take a huge bite, both of them light up with sparkling eyes. The taste clearly hits them hard, and while everyone around them enjoys the treats, Kwang is especially impressed because the honey algae has a completely different charm from the gari tiak they made earlier. Even Garen happily agrees that it's delicious. Sejun takes a piece for himself and smiles as he enjoys it too, thinking that maybe the food tastes even better because everyone worked so hard to make it. For a moment, the whole farm is simply enjoying the reward together. Then Sejun suddenly notices someone approaching and calls out to Theo. Theo comes walking over with an unusually proud expression, and the moment Sejun sees the shiny golden badge displayed in Theo's paw, his expression changes to surprise. Theo closes his eyes smugly and proudly announces that he has officially become a top-tier wandering merchant. The reaction from everyone is immediate. Bat, Kwang, Papa Rabbit, Mama Rabbit, Garen, and even the Mushroom Ants all cheer and congratulate Theo, praising him for finally reaching such an impressive position. Theo soaks up every bit of the attention, his tail swishing proudly as he thinks about how far he has come. But apparently, becoming a top-tier wandering merchant isn't enough for him. Theo folds his arms, puts on an even more confident expression, and immediately demands that Sejun make him the vice chairman. Sejun pauses and gives him a skeptical look before simply answering, "No way." Theo doesn't even process the rejection at first. Completely lost in his own fantasy, he closes his eyes and cheerfully thanks Sejun as if the promotion has already been approved, even talking about how he won't take the position for granted. Then the words finally register. Theo's eyes snap open. He realizes Sejun actually said no and immediately demands to know why. After all, he's a top-tier wandering merchant now. Sejun crosses his arms and explains that becoming vice chairman isn't something that easy, and then, perhaps feeling a little guilty after seeing Theo's confidence, he gives him a condition. Theo has to become the tower's greatest wandering merchant first. Only then will Sejun officially make him vice chairman Theo. For Theo, that condition is devastating. His ears droop, his eyes fill with tears, and he clutches his precious golden badge as if his entire dream has just been shattered. He keeps repeating that he's already a top-tier wandering merchant, before finally collapsing onto the ground and throwing a full tantrum, flailing his paws and crying that he worked so hard to reach this position. Sejun watches the dramatic display with a couple of nervous sweat drops, privately thinking that giving Theo even more authority right now would definitely be a terrible idea. But Theo suddenly remembers something. He begins frantically searching through his pouch and announces that he brought something Sejun would definitely love. Sejun sits down calmly and asks what it is, while the rabbits watch with curiosity. Theo proudly pulls out 2 scrolls and drops them in front of Sejun. They're the land deeds Sejun had asked for. Sejun immediately sits up in surprise. Theo actually managed to get 2 of them. Sejun picks up the scrolls and starts wondering which floors they belong to, but before he can figure it out, system windows appear over both documents, labeling them as unappraised documents. Sejun becomes suspicious and wonders whether these really are land deeds. Theo takes that personally, throwing his paws up and indignantly reminding Sejun that he's a top-tier wandering merchant now. Sejun laughs and tells him that he believes him, but since the documents are unappraised, it would be better to have Aileen check them. So Sejun contacts Aileen and asks her to appraise the documents. Aileen agrees, but naturally, she wants payment for her services. Her price is simple, she wants some of the honey Bexialgae Sejun just made. Sejun happily agrees, and the system immediately confirms that the tower manager is satisfied. While Sejun waits for the appraisal, Theo turns his attention toward Kwang and announces that he has a present for him too. Kwang's eyes light up at the word present, and he happily thanks his big brother Theo. Theo, however, immediately starts panicking as he reaches into his pouch and pulls something out. With a proud shout, he reveals a hoe. Kwang stares at it. His reaction is basically, a stick? Theo is completely confident that Kwang will love it. He proudly asks how he likes it and even tells Kwang that he'd better listen to him from now on because he brought him such a great present. Kwang grabs the hoe and swings it around a few times, examining it without much enthusiasm. To him, it doesn't seem particularly impressive compared to his beloved original stick. Meanwhile, Sejun continues waiting for Eileen's appraisal. Through the magical projection, Sejun asks whether the 2 documents really are land deeds. Aileen confirms that they are, but there's a problem. The appraisal reveals that neither document actually belongs to the Black Tower. Sejun immediately becomes concerned. The 2 scrolls are opened, and their identities are finally revealed. One is a land deed for the 74th floor of the Blue Tower, while the other is a land deed for the 43rd floor of the White Tower. Sejun stares at them in complete disbelief. These aren't land deeds for the Black Tower at all. They're land deeds belonging to other towers. That realization opens up a much bigger possibility. Sejun wonders whether this means he can actually travel to other towers and obtain land there as well. While Sejun is still processing that discovery, Kwang finishes examining Theo's present and reaches his own conclusion. The hoe doesn't grow, and he likes his original stick better. Theo is absolutely horrified. Kwang then casually hands the hoe over to Sejun instead, saying that Daddy can have it. Sejun is caught completely off guard and asks what the strange tool even is, while Theo throws his paws into the air in outrage, demanding to know whether everyone is just going to ignore his generous gesture. Sejun takes the hoe and thanks Kwang anyway, even though a system window immediately labels the tool as unappraised equipment. Theo, meanwhile, looks genuinely heartbroken because he was the one who brought it. Still, Sejun decides the mysterious hoe should be appraised too, so he asks Aileen to examine it. Aileen is willing to do so, but once again she asks for another piece of rice cake as payment. Sejun agrees without hesitation. As Aileen begins the appraisal, magical energy gathers around the hoe. Lightning crackles around the strange tool, and Aileen's expression slowly changes from curiosity to genuine shock. Something is wrong. Or rather, something about this hoe is far more extraordinary than anyone expected. A system message appears explaining that the tower manager cannot completely appraise the item because it isn't registered as an item belonging to the Black Tower. Sejun immediately becomes confused. This isn't an ordinary Black Tower item either. Aileen admits that her current abilities aren't enough to fully reveal all of its information, but she can tell one thing for certain: this is definitely no ordinary piece of equipment. Then the system finally reveals the information it can identify. The item is called Earth-Moving Legend, Myler's Hoe. According to the description, it once belonged to Myler, a legendary farmer who lived long before the tower was even built. Myler was said to have farmed by manipulating the very power of the earth itself, and this hoe is a legendary grade piece of equipment that was never registered in the Black Tower. Its information is still incomplete, its creator is listed as unknown, and it has no usage requirements. But one thing is fully revealed. Its grade is S+, and its skill is Earth-Moving Master. Sejun's eyes nearly pop out of his head. This isn't just some random hoe Theo picked up because Kwon likes sticks. It's a legendary grade piece of equipment. Kwon and Garen are equally stunned, but Sejun quickly turns his surprise into excitement. He scoops Kwon up into his arms and happily praises him for finding such an incredible item. Then Sejun makes a ridiculous promise. From now on, Kwon will receive 10 jars of honey every single day. Kwon happily giggles as Sejun kisses him on the cheek and affectionately praises him, while Theo stands nearby watching the entire scene unfold with tears filling his eyes. After all, Theo was the one who brought the legendary hoe in the first place. And yet somehow, Kwon is the one getting 10 jars of honey a day for it. Theo brought the legendary hoe and still got robbed of all the credit. Comment justice for Theo.